Objection, it will be admitted to the record. And Senator Slotkin, welcome to the committee.
Thank
and
you.
Are recognized.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for referencing the great Carl Levin as you introduced me. We miss him in Michigan. For those who I haven't met in my 1 week that I've been sworn into the Senate, I'm a CIA officer recruited after 9/11. I did 3 tours armed in Iraq alongside the military. And have worked for 4 different secretaries of defense, both Democrat and Republican, proudly, and watched them make decisions that literally determine the life and death of Americans in the dark of night. I'm also a Democrat representing a state that Trump won, right? We both won on the same ballot. So I understand that President Trump has the right to nominate his people. We are going to have policies that we disagree with. All of that, to me, comes very standard. What I think I'm most concerned with is that no president has the right to use the uniformed military in a way that violates the U.S. Constitution and further taints the military as that apolitical institution that we all want, right? And our founders designed the system so that, we had posse comitatus, that we weren't going to use active duty military inside the United States and make American citizens potentially scared of their own military. We went through our own experience with that with the British. As the Secretary of Defense, you will be the one man standing in the breach should President Trump give an illegal order, right? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, you are going to be the guy that he calls to implement this order. Do you agree that there are some orders that can be given by the Commander-in-Chief that would violate the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, thank you for your service. But I reject the premise that President Trump is going to be giving illegal orders.
No, I'm not saying he will, but do you believe there is such a thing as an illegal order that Joe Biden or any other president, Donald Trump, could give? Is there anything that a commander-in-chief could ask you to do with the uniformed military that would be in violation of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, anybody of any party could give an order that is against the Constitution or against the law.
Right. Okay. Are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President Trump will be giving any illegal orders at all.
This isn't a hypothetical, okay? Your predecessor in a Trump administration, Secretary Esper, was asked and did use uniformed military to clear unarmed protesters. He was given the order to potentially shoot at them. Helos flew low in Washington, D.C. as crowd control. He later apologized publicly for those actions. Was he right or wrong to apologize?
Senator, I was there on the ground.
I understand, and I respect that.
I've been there.
But you're about to be the Secretary of Defense.
That was involved in that moment. I
was he right to? So he was
legality and the Constitution.
Sir, was he right or wrong to apologize?
I'm not going to put words in the mouth of Secretary Esper or anybody else.
He said them himself. You don't have to. What are you scared of? Did he do the right thing by apologizing?
I'm not scared of anything, Senator.
Then say yes or no. You can say no.
The laws and the Constitution.
Okay.
In any particular
Donald
scenario.
Trump asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. If Donald Trump asked you to use the 82nd Airborne in law enforcement roles in Washington, D.C., would you also convince him otherwise?
I'm not going to get ahead of conversations I would have with the president. However, there are laws and processes inside our Constitution that would be followed.
President Trump said in November that he is willing to consider using the active duty military against the, quote, enemy within. Have you been personally involved in discussions of using the U.S. military active duty inside the United States?
Senator, I'm glad we finally got to the topic of border security equaling national security because it's been abdicated and ignored for the last 4 years.
That wasn't my question. I'm just asking, have you been involved? You're about to be the Secretary of Defense, potentially. Have you been involved in discussions about using the active duty military inside the United States?
Senator, I am not yet the Secretary of Defense.
Right. I'm
if confirmed, I would be party to any number of
conversations. So you haven't been in any of these
conversations. Which I would not reveal what I have discussed with the President of the United States.
No, just have you been in conversations? You're going to be in charge of 3 million people, the active duty that I know you care about, I believe you care about. So have you been in conversations about using the active duty in any way, whether it's setting up and detention camps, policing dangerous cities. Have you been involved in any of those conversations?
Certainly, I have been involved in conversations relating to doing things this administration has not, which is secure the southern border and not allow floods of illegals to enter our country through an invasion that threatens the American people. And there are ways in which the military is already playing a role in that, to include 5,000 National Guardsmen from Indiana and Texas who are at the border right now, allowing for border security. So there is plenty of precedent
duty military
for military
to
members
staff detention
enforcing our southern
centers?
border.
Our U.S. military is not trained in law enforcement roles. I think you know that, right? We've seen how that mission is difficult for them in places like Iraq and Afghanistan because that's not the training a uniformed military comes with. Do you support the use of active duty military in supporting detention camps?
Senator, everything we will do would be lawful and under the Constitution, but I recognize that this administration has abdicated its responsibility. President Trump is going to restore order at the border, prevent our enemies from invading, and yes, he has said
Sir, I get your filibustering. I get it. I get it.
Part of what happened.
In the spirit of preserving the institution that I think we both care about, legitimately, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I've heard a couple of different things. One, you said you will not change the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is what governs justice system in the military. Yes or no? You said that earlier.
Those are laws, Senator, set by Congress.
Okay, so you will not go to change it. You will not attempt to change it. You also said that JAG officers are potentially people who put their own interests in their own medals and promotions ahead of the troops. Senator Lindsey Graham was a JAG officer for most of his life. Is that what you believe about those who implement our justice system in the U.S. military?
Senator, I was speaking about particular JAG officers I've had to deal with in my military experience.
Are you going to get
not
involved?
About a member of the United States Senate.
Are you, as Secretary of Defense, going to get involved in the implementation of the U.S. Military Code of Justice?
Senator, ultimately, it will be a big part of my job to evaluate decisions vis-a-vis the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yes. Have you seen
fairly.
Is CQ Brown on your list in the Warrior boards to be removed from his position?
Senator, every single senior officer will be reviewed based on meritocracy, standards, and lethality, and commitment to lawful orders they will be given.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. I now recognize Senator Shaheen for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a request.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking forward to working with you. You know, I'm a former CIA officer and Pentagon official. I did 3 tours in Iraq. I worked very proudly for both Democrat and Republican administrations, including in the White House of both. I'm also a Democrat who won in a Trump state, right? A state that we were both on the ballot. You know, I think what's interesting is we don't have to guess how you'll be in this job because you've been in the job before. You are kind of the ultimate Washington insider. You've been in for 26 years in this town. You've been on the Senate. You've started a think tank. You've been in and out of different policy jobs. So you're definitely of this town, and you clearly know the rules well of this town. You've said, and I agree with you, that a budget is a reflection of president's priorities. I think the thing that was really disturbing as a Michigander was one of the things you did 3 out of the 4 budgets that you prepared last time was zero out the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, this huge program to maintain the Great Lakes, 20% of the freshwater of the world, where it took bipartisan work, including potentially senators in this room before my time, to claw that back. We have projects on treating algae blooms and invasive species, cleaning up some of our bays, making sure it's accessible for commercial traffic. What's your view on the GLRI? Are we going to have this conversation again when you zero it out in the budget?
I have not started, because I'm not confirmed, working on the president's fiscal year 26 budget. I can't speak to those issues, but I'm happy to work with you on your viewpoints as it pertains to that program, and consider all of those in the recommendations we give for the president, and inevitably what we end up coming up here and defending.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very bipartisan. There's 465 projects in Ohio, 1,200 projects in Wisconsin, a ton in Michigan. So it's something, but can you confirm you submitted a zeroing out of that program 3 years in a row last time you were OMB director?
It's been a long time, Senator. I have to go back and refresh my memory on the specifics of our budgets, but I'm happy to do that in the QFRs.
Yeah. On the issue of impoundment, I know you've addressed this, but if this group on a bipartisan basis authorizes more money, as we do every year for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, that you will spend that money in the Great Lakes states where it was allocated for?
Senator, I'm not going to engage in the hypotheticals with regard to the impoundment conversation.
We've heard it. It's okay. So the other question I have is on your views of the civil service, again, as a CIA officer, which is, set up and has been reformed over the years, that's for sure, to provide best assessment and advice to the president. You said that OMB was not an agency where you had a bureaucratic problem, but which bureaucracies specifically do you believe have been weaponized?
Again, I'm not going to get into all of the agencies that I believe have some of those characteristics.
Let's give an example of one. I mean,
well, I think, the Department of Justice is clearly one that has bureaucracies within it that engaged in trying to take out their own president during the first term. The extent to which the FBI goes and investigates someone that comes to a school board meeting in Loudoun County for being concerned about the situation with his daughter, and then gets investigated as a domestic terrorist.
So the director and the deputy director of these agencies, they're at the prerogative of the president. The president, any president, has about 1,500 political appointee jobs that they get to allocate all over the bureaucracy. I don't quibble with that. Do you believe that intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies need more political appointees to keep kind of management at those agencies?
Again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of a specific proposal that the president has not made.
But what's your view? Would you support a proposal? I'm just asking, you want the job, you want it back. Would you support a proposal to put more political appointees to oversee the activities of American law enforcement at the federal level and American intelligence community?
Again, the president hasn't spoken to that matter to my knowledge, and I'm not here on behalf of my own personal views.
Okay. Again, the feeling that we have, the thing that keeps coming up is, again, I don't quibble at all with the fact that the president is going to put in people that I don't agree with on a policy perspective. That's not my debate. My concern with you and with potential Secretary Hegseth yesterday is that when asked clear constitutional questions about the allocation of money, you can't answer a straight constitutional question. Again, we're going to disagree on policy. There's no question about that, and that's not my issue with you. My issue is the constitutional side, because you are going to swear an oath to the Constitution, not to Donald Trump, just like any other confirmed official. So can you confirm for me, please, that you will abide by the Constitution and current law as it is, not what you wish it to be?
I absolutely will abide by the Constitution at all times.
And your interpretation does not, pardon the pun, trump the interpretation of the Supreme Court or at current practice on the books?
Again, administration goes through a very, very extensive policy process with the lawyers of the Department of Justice to abide by the Constitution.
You can see how this bureaucratic, wonky answer you keep giving, right? You're claiming to be an outsider that says you're going to shake things up, but you're giving the most wonky answers. I just want to hear that when you hold up your hand, like many of us have done in this room, to put themselves in harm's way, that you're going to protect and defend the Constitution as interpreted by the people who are in a position to interpret it, like our Supreme Court. And that's what bothers me about you. It's not that we disagree on policy. It's that basic tenet that a lot of us have had to do in this room on both sides of the aisle. That's all I care about. So with that, I'll yield back. But I wish from nominees that we see across the board, just be straight on the U.S. Constitution. Thanks for being here, and thanks for our time in my office. Governor, I'm a former CIA officer, joined right after 9/11, and served 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military. I'm actually the first CIA officer in the Senate. And to me, the most important thing, again, as a Democrat from a state that Trump won, right, on the same ballot, we both won. I understand we're going to have different policy opinions. I certainly understand that the president or incoming president has the right to nominate whoever he wants. Those are not the issues for me that I'm going to spend my time on. The ones that I care about the most relate to the mission of the organization when it was founded, protecting the homeland. And I think, to me, it's one thing when there's campaign rhetoric or politicization of things. Everyone does that on both sides of the aisle in this committee and in our line of work. But when it comes to actually protecting the country, you do have to be clear and honest about facts and not conflate things. So it's just important to me that I know, particularly since you do have one of the intelligence agencies within the Department of Homeland Security, that you're going to call a spade, right? The most recent acts of domestic terrorism in New Orleans, horrible incident, in Nevada, had nothing to do with migrants, correct?
Correct.
They were homegrown American citizens. One of them was actually in a very elite military unit. I mean, it's horrible. It's one of the hardest things to catch, the sort of lone wolf, radicalized American citizen. But I want to protect ourselves. Our most recent examples of domestic terrorism were not what we've spent the majority talking about today, crime from a migrant. And I don't dispute there is crime. But I just want to know, and I want to hear from you as an intelligence officer, that you're going to speak about real threats and not blow something up, politicize something, make something more exciting, because that's maybe what the president wants to hear. But your mission to protect and defend the Constitution means calling honestly what the threats are to the country. Can you just give me a yes or no, please?
Yes, Senator, I will be as transparent and factual every day with you and the American people as possible based on the information that I have. I don't know if the investigations are closed in New Orleans and in Nevada, but what we know so far and needs to be relayed to the American people needs to be the truth and facts.
Yeah, I'd ask that. We've talked a lot about border security. As a CIA officer, I think one of the only people on this committee who's actually worked on protecting the homeland. I'm a Middle East terrorism and militia expert by training, so I believe deeply in it. And every country of the world gets to decide who comes inside its borders. That's not a radical concept. But I think I've been open with this committee that it is also on us to fix the deeply broken legal immigration system. I'm glad to hear that you're going to carry out the laws on the immigration system. Democrats and Republicans are to blame that we haven't fixed this system. But I also believe you can't fully control the border unless you give people that we need for our companies, for our economy, a legal vetted way to come here. So do you believe in legal vetted immigration and that we need more of it in the United States?
I do believe we need to follow our legal immigration laws and that it needs to be vetted. We need more resources, I believe, in some of the elements of this to ensure
do you believe that our economy depends and needs some level, just like your family came from Norway and on economic, drive and wanted a better life?
Immigration's always been a part of our history and will be a part of our future. We just need to make sure that we're adhering to our nation's laws, which this body has the ability to
I'm with you.
Continue to change and to put in place.
Again, going back to the fact that you will pledge an oath to the Constitution, not to President Trump, just like every other nominee. President Trump said in November that he is willing to use law enforcement, National Guard, or even active duty military to go after, quote, the threat from within the United States. I don't know exactly what he was talking about. But we have recent examples from your predecessors at DHS where federal law enforcement were sent into a state, in this case, Oregon, without coordination with the governor. Those federal law enforcement officers at the time were putting down threats to federal buildings, and they were legitimate threats. I don't dispute there was destruction of property going on during a bunch of protests and riots. So I don't dispute that, but they weren't wearing insignia. We talked about this. They weren't wearing any markings. So people were arrested by folks in fatigues with no names, no idea who they were, like right out of a bad Hollywood movie, okay? If the president asks you to send in federal law enforcement to a state without coordination of that governor, would you support that action?
You know, Senator, my job, if nominated and sworn in as Secretary of Homeland Security, is to uphold the Constitution and to
So you will
uphold
push
the rules
back?
of this country. Yes, that will be the oath and the pledge that I will be making. And my goal also is to work with you to ensure that we have situations that are always appropriate, that we are well defined on
I just
who we
need to know,
are.
you're a former governor. You can imagine that if Joe Biden sent in 700 federal law enforcement under Secretary Mayorkas without coordinating with you, I think we can agree you'd be a little upset. So I just ask that you give the same respect for coordination, and that we are very sensitive. People are worried about politicizing of law enforcement and the uniformed military. That's a bad thing. I hope we can agree. Lastly, I will just say, look forward to looking at the northern border, the Gordie Howe Bridge, your help staffing that. We know you aren't, right now, across many administrations, we haven't met our staffing goals at DHS, and that's a problem, so we really want to make sure that opens on time. But I also want your assurances, you know, you received FEMA assistance from Joe Biden's administration, right? You had historic floods, you asked and requested of the administration, and you were given millions of dollars to help with that. I understand you don't like Gavin Newsom, but can you say in front of the American people that you will open the books to this committee, who does have oversight over FEMA, right? That you will open the books in a bipartisan way to ensure, whether it's North Carolina or California or anywhere in between, that the American people can know that you are not playing politics with disaster assistance?
Yes, Senator, I'll work with you and this committee to make sure I'm following the federal law and ensuring that you have information and transparency from us and from DHS and FEMA.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yield back.
Senator Langford.
Governor Nome, great to see you.
Great to see you, too.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for accepting this nod that the president has given you. For Brian, thanks. Both of you, you've walked through a lot. I have had the privilege of knowing you for a very long time.
Slotkin.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Chairman. I'm honored to be here as the successor of Debbie Stabenow, our esteemed former chairman, the queen of Michigan agriculture. We miss her, and I have really, really big shoes to fill there. Thank you for our conversation in my office. I appreciate your positive approach to meeting with everybody. And I have the honor to live on my family farm, which used to be beef cattle, is now soy and corn alternatively. But I'm also a former CIA officer, Pentagon official. So I really come to the Ag Committee with a sense that food security is national security, and the United States should always be able to feed itself by itself. And everything flows from there. If people agree, then there's a lot of policies that become pretty clear. The sale of our land to foreign governments or to private equity, all of those things. So I think that's the approach that I tend to take. I'm also from Michigan. We're not Kansas. We're not Iowa. We are specialty crops, right? We have the second most diverse agricultural sector in the country after California. We take pride in not doing monocropping and doing a lot of fruits and vegetables and a lot of other things. So this is why I'm particularly concerned about the tariffs. Everyone's talking about tariffs. Mr. Trump is throwing them around, and I just want to review the bidding to make sure, particularly with your agency, that we're all on the same page on what happened the last time President Trump put on tariffs, what happened specifically to our farmers. So just to review the bidding, President Trump announced 25% tariffs on Chinese products, batteries, TVs, medical devices. Again, I certainly understand the instinct as a CIA officer, right? I want to push back on China. China retaliated and put 25% tariffs on soybeans, fruits, pork, and some other items. Then we got into a trade war. We started adding more things to the list. They started adding more things to the list. It went on and on and on and back and forth. Suddenly our farmers across the country are screaming bloody murder because the markets that they used to have access to, no one wanted to buy our stuff because it had that 25% tariff. We felt that very acutely. So what did we do? Because we felt, under the Trump administration, people rightfully felt like our farmers were getting the shaft here. They raided the CCC account, the emergency rainy day account that you will have, control over, for $23 billion to give subsidies to our farmers. So we put on the tariff, got into a trade war, ended up, our farmers were in trouble, we paid them off. And everyone's here has said, no farmer wants a subsidy, they want to work, right? They want to get paid a fair rate for their crop. That emergency fund is the same fund that helps us with things like avian flu that we're now dealing with all over the country. So you can imagine, as a Michigander, the throwing around of tariffs, particularly with Canada, Mexico, a bunch of other places. I'm trepidatious that this is going to come back to our farmers. And when you get confirmed, and it looks like you will swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, not to President Trump. So can you say, I know you've said it, but for the Michiganders watching, that you will throw your body in front of the bus to make sure that any political talking point on tariffs that may sound good is actually truly tested against how it will impact our farmers, like it was not last time around?
Senator, I appreciate your passion. I share it. And I think we are similar in a lot of ways. And yes, my commitment is that there will be no sleeping, that we will work around the clock to ensure that our ag communities across this country are represented in those discussions and at the table. And I will do everything in my power to elevate, preserve, honor, conserve that backbone of America.
Yeah, I just want to know that, you have a good relationship with President Trump, and that's a value add. So use it to help our farmers, not just a political talking point. We all want to punch back on China, most of us. But it's got to fit reality here and not end up boomeranging on us like it did last time. Next is avian flu. We talked about this as well in my office. Michigan has been dealing with this. Lots of states around the country are dealing with it. We've had human beings, a few getting ill, one passed away. We now see it in cats, household pets that are eating birds that have it, that kind of thing. And what we've seen, I think Michigan has gotten decently high marks for handling it well because we've cooperated with the federal government, right? But there's a lot of folks around the country that are not so friendly with the federal government. You are going to be, the federal government, having to put some muscle behind some of our rules so that we don't see this spread, right? So we don't, again, we're all, right now, you cannot get a dozen eggs around Holly, Michigan, where I live, for less than $4.69 a dozen. It used to be $2. So please tell me what you're going to do in the federal government role that you're about to take to make sure that we stem the spread of avian flu, even to states and farmers who are not so friendly with the federal government.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. And I do remember our conversation. It is certainly a top priority. I know in my opening remarks, it is one of my top 4 priorities on day one, putting the right team in place to ensure that, that what you discussed and outlined is happening. I do believe that with my depth of experience with working at all levels of government, specifically at the state level. I've been working closely, I believe probably mostly Republican, maybe all Republican, but all the ag commissioners I'm already in contact with, and if confirmed, will continue to work closely with them. I think there's no doubt that the all of government approach, working with the stakeholder community, but also the state and local officials, is going to be extremely important. And to your point about food security at the top of your remarks, that remains paramount, I think, for all of us.
Yeah. And then lastly, I'll just echo some of Senator Warnock's comments. We have seen in versions of the Farm Bill that were created in the past year, both in the House and the Senate, that SNAP is usually the bill payer for at least part of it. In cuts to SNAP, and then additional subsidies to some of our farmers, frankly, particularly farmers down south. I understand that that's popular. I would just ask you again to look into your heart. If the majority of poor people are children, that's not a work requirement that they can meet, right? So please just remember the children and be thoughtful about our approach on SNAP, not just, again, a political talking point.
I will,
Thank you.
Senator.
I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman, and congratulations on your gavel. Look forward to working with you.
We have got to start taking care of these young men and women if we're going to build the fighting force that we need. Thank you.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Slotkin.
Sorry, apologies. I'm not used to going anything but last, Chairman, so shocked me. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on your nomination, as I said when we met. I was glad to hear so many people talking about the collision that happened last night. You will have an important role in that investigation if confirmed. It does sound like it's a training mission, but it's just important that we lead a thorough process. People across the country are mourning, watching that, and everyone on this panel here flies in and out of there. I mean, it's hard not to think about it. So thank you for your attention to that. You know, I think the thing we talked about in my office is I am a Democrat who won on the same ballot as Donald Trump. I absolutely understand that Donald Trump has the right to nominate his own people, put forward his own policies. I've seen that now in many transitions, Democrat and Republican. But the thing that I keep coming back to is the core constitutional responsibility. You will swear an oath to the Constitution, not to any one president. Many of us have worked alongside or in the military for a long time and care deeply about it remaining apolitical. We're seeing now active duty military, Army, being sent to the border, being sent on missions right now to support DHS. But according to our Constitution, the U.S. military active duty cannot perform law enforcement roles. When you were trained in the military, were you trained on basic law enforcement techniques?
I was not, Senator.
And can we agree that searching a building in Iraq or Afghanistan when you're in a combat zone as an Army officer is fundamentally different than performing those kinds of search and inside the United States with American citizens?
Senator, this isn't meant to be evasive. I've been trained on it, and so I couldn't answer what would be different about it from my training.
Yeah, I think the issue is not just the Constitution, although that should be enough. I am deeply concerned that active duty troops are going to be forced into law enforcement roles, and we're already hearing stories that really, really touch right on the line. They're not properly trained. There's going to be an incident. Someone's going to get hurt. There's going to be some sort of blow up. And suddenly, we're going to have a community deeply, deeply angry at uniformed military who were just told to go and drive those DHS vehicles, clear that building, perform support to something. So I have to ask you again that if the U.S. Army was asked, active duty, was asked to do something that contravened the Constitution, can you say clearly that you will push back on anyone, whether it's the Secretary of Defense or the Commander-in-Chief, and stand up on behalf of the Army instead of just doing whatever you're told?
Just to answer the beginning part of the question, Senator, I reject the premise that the President or Secretary of Defense would ask for an order like that.
Fine.
But I will always follow the law.
Okay. I mean, your predecessor, Secretary of the Army, Secretary Esper, had this exact thing that he wrote about in his book, 82nd Airborne Army, was asked to come in and clean up peaceful protests in Washington, D.C. So I reject your rejection that this is theoretical, that this is hypothetical. It's not. And a nominee and confirmed secretary under Trump. I know they've removed his portrait, but I just have to say this is not a hypothetical. So we're counting on you to protect the integrity of a non-political military that is not trained in law enforcement roles. Next, do you support revoking the pension that comes with anyone who is honorably discharged from the Army?
It's hard to deal in a hypothetical, Senator.
It's not hypothetical. There's now focus on Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And I know there's lots of controversy around Mark Milley, but you can't debate that he served many more years than anyone on this panel. Can you tell me that you support the seemingly political reprisal of removing someone's pension when they've already been honorably discharged?
Senator, without knowing the specific details, I do support the president's right to execute lawful orders.
Because you see the pattern this starts. So then another administration comes in and suddenly people who supported Donald Trump are having their pensions removed. You can see how this politicizes the institution that should be apolitical. And for the January 6 guys and all these folks, there wasn't a question about their pensions, and I have deep concerns about it. I know my time is up, and I yield back. I rise today as a very new senator, a freshman senator, to talk about the confirmation prospects for the nominee for the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. And I think context matters here. I am the first CIA officer to ever be elected to the U.S. Senate. Before I ran for office in Michigan, I had a career in national security. I'm what's called a 9/11 baby. I happened to be in New York City on my second day of graduate school when 9/11 happened. It changed my life. I decided to go into national security, got recruited by the CIA right out of grad school, and then was quickly sent on my first of 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military, providing intelligence to the U.S. military to deal with the groups that were shooting at U.S. forces and plotting against the U.S. homeland. I worked in national security roles very proudly in both administrations, Democratic and Republican. I worked in the White House for George W. Bush, and I was there the Friday that he left office, and the Monday that Barack Obama walked in. I did the same job for 2 very different presidents, one from each party. I went on to be a Pentagon Assistant Secretary of Defense. But in between all that time, one of the things I got to do was help stand up the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I was the intelligence briefer in Baghdad for Ambassador John Negroponte, who was the first ambassador to Iraq under the Bush administration. I would provide him intelligence briefings early in the morning. And one day he came back from a trip to Washington and said, I'm going to be nominated to be the first Director of National Intelligence. It's this completely new position. It's a position that has been created because of the failures of 9/11, our failures to anticipate the attacks of 9/11, to put the pieces together between the FBI, the CIA, the military, all those who had a piece of the story but didn't have a place and a venue to combine it all together to anticipate the most devastating attacks on the U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor. I came home and happened to be one of those first employees to set up the Director of National Intelligence. I think it was employee number 5. I was John Negroponte's first special assistant. So I was his, body person, helping him set up that office. So when I talk about the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard, I don't do it willy-nilly. I don't do it without a background on these topics. And I believe that the people who should be taking the positions that are critical for national security should be people of competence and character. What does the Director of National Intelligence do? The office was created, as I said, to combine all of the different threads of information at the 17 different intelligence community agencies that we have to prevent intelligence failures like we had on 9/11. This is a serious position. This is a position that in the past has been in the Oval Office every morning with the intelligence briefings provided by the agencies. This is the position in the dead of night that makes consequential decisions on the security and safety of people here. And most Americans have no idea the number of threats that we still thwart every single month against our homeland. We sleep well at night because the intelligence community is working together to prevent those threats, along with our partners and our allies and our military. So for me, I want to know that the person who's going to be woken up in the middle of the night to make those last-minute decisions, do we move on that intelligence? Do we act based on that threat, that they are someone, again, of competence and character? And what I have seen from Ms. Gabbard does not meet that threshold. She has, first of all, repeatedly questioned the integrity of the intelligence community, right? She's gone after the intelligence community that she hopes to lead. She has labeled tens of thousands of intelligence personnel as deep state without even a semblance of understanding of what they do every day to keep her safe. She's questioned the findings of the intelligence community, and I think more egregious than anything, she has shown a repeated preference for our adversaries over the intelligence community in the United States of America. Most notably, a surprise trip to visit the now ousted president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. Imagine the decision-making that goes into planning a secret trip to visit a man who has killed thousands of his countrymen, thousands of relatives of Michiganders that I represent, a man who we know has used chemical weapons, violating international law, devastating communities, a man who has seemingly sat aside as insurgent groups, terrorist groups, took territory in his area and allowed them to project attacks into neighboring states and to plot against the U.S. homeland. She makes the decision to go and visit this man, throw flowers at his feet, do public TV with him, go publicly and show her support. Now, I don't know if she's just deeply naive. I don't know if in some twisted way she thought that this was her way of being helpful. But whether she did it out of naivete or she did it knowing what this man has done and the implications of her actions, either way shows a complete lack of judgment. Same goes for her seeming glorification of Vladimir Putin. It is hard to understand, coming from the country that defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War, that we would put a woman in charge of our entire intelligence community who has shown over and over repeated interest in Vladimir Putin, taking his side of the argument, wondering what he's done right and our intelligence community has done wrong. Can you imagine what it feels like to be a member of the intelligence community right now with everything going on, with all of the discrediting of what they have done and what they do every single day, and now this woman is going to be in charge of this agency? It is an insult to people who have dedicated their lives and put themselves in harm's way to have her confirmed into this position. Now, we've watched her flip-flop on a bunch of issues, right? Issues that Democrats and Republicans have concerns with. You know, she used to have a lot of concern about what's called Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. She fought against it. Now she's somehow for it. I'm not saying people can't change, but I'm just saying someone who doesn't have the backbone to stand up and be clear with their principles, I'm having a hard time imagining them lead in the heat of the moment when you're in the Situation Room and consequential decisions are being made. I think the feeling that I have about where we are in this country right now is that we're sort of in this fever dream. There's this race to discredit, to attack, to cut. And look, I'll be the first person to say that there is fat on the bone in the federal government. I worked in the federal government. There are plenty of things that can be reformed in the federal government. But the double whammy of attacking the people who keep us safe every day, of trying to push them out. I just had a Republican on my way here, member say, hey, I've just heard about what's going on at CIA. Are they trying to get everyone to leave? Or what about people who are in sensitive positions? Great question. But the other punch is to put someone in charge of the intelligence community that has such disdain for our allies, for our intelligence officers, and such love for our adversaries. And so I urge all of my Republican colleagues to search their soul, right? Play the long game. Don't live in fear of the Trump administration and Donald Trump specifically. You know in your heart that these people aren't qualified and that the life and limb of American citizens is in their hands. So I urge all of my colleagues to vote against Tulsi Gabbard. I will be voting against her here later today. And I hope that we as American citizens can come up and up for air from this fever dream and remember that reform of the federal government does not mean slashing the people that keep us safe every day. And with that, I yield back.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Congressman Bishop, good to see you. We were neighbors for a short time in Longworth when we were both members of Congress. Separate from being good office mates, I'm really concerned about the view that you and Director Vogt and the President have expressed on the executive branch and the President having the unilateral ability to spend federal dollars despite what Congress appropriates. And I will skip the irony of a congressman who ran for office and was deeply involved in appropriating dollars and voting on those things for years and years and years, now being seemingly willing to give up that authority. It's a fundamental principle of the Constitution. The Supreme Court, starting back in 1975, has said that, as the Constitution says, this body, which Republicans now control, both houses of, appropriates the dollars, and the federal government spends them accordingly. This has been reiterated by the courts. Can you tell us your position as Deputy Director of OMB? Do you believe that President Trump has the ability to spend appropriated dollars in different ways than they were appropriated?
Thank you for the question, Senator Slotkin. President Trump has run on the issue of impoundment, and there will be a process in the administration, the decision-making involving lawyers. I will not be serving as deputy director in a legal capacity, but there'll be folks who are looking at the legal issues you describe. But
but it's just your view. I understand lawyers, but your personal view, like, just be open with it. Vogt was very open about it. Do you believe that if this chairman appropriates dollars that are voted on by this Senate, that you and the President Trump have the ability to spend those dollars in different way than your Republican chairman has appropriated?
Well, Senator, I support the views of President Trump and Director Vogt on the subject.
So yes, Mr. Vogt owned it. You should just own it. So let me ask this question. If you believe that to be true, do you believe that you have the right to unilaterally take money out of Social Security? Not that you will, but that you have the right.
Senator, the President's made very clear that I'm not going to touch Social Security, but and you're speaking to hypotheticals. I would say I don't think that
it's not a hypothetical if every single Michigander that I talk to is worried about you cutting their Social Security benefits, their Medicare benefits, their veterans benefits, the post office, right? I was just up in very red conservative Upper Peninsula of Michigan, right? I'm the only Democrat there.
Right.
And they are like happy, as you said. There's people who are perfectly happy with cuts that are going on, but they are desperately worried that you are going to cut their Social Security, their Medicare, their veterans benefits, and the Postal Service. And despite everyone saying they're not going to touch it, you are smarter than that and know that the big cuts that you are calling for need big chunks out of these programs.
Senator, I don't hesitate to say that I do not believe that the President can stop Social Security benefits being paid. I don't think so.
You don't think he can pull money out of Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits?
I don't.
And the Postal Service.
And of course, the reason I say that the President said he's not going to is because that's what he's consistently declared, so I don't think it's an issue. But
if you look behind the numbers, and you guys are looking for $6 trillion, DOJ is looking for that. You guys have been open about it, which I appreciate. $6 trillion doesn't come from $1 million here and $1 million there. It comes from cutting big programs. And what you are saying is, despite what everyone says here, you are working for, you proudly support this idea that you can move money even though it's been appropriated for a certain reason. So I don't think any American, red, blue, purple, the whole thing, should trust that these programs that they've worked their entire life for are safe if you believe you can do anything that you want.
Well, there are distinctions to be made, Senator. So to the point you suggested hypocrisy about serving in Congress and then taking this position, Harry Truman exercised the impoundment power to cancel a squadron of, I believe it was bombers, that he had vetoed and Congress had passed over his veto. These things have happened across history by presidents.
Well, and I would just say I feel very strongly that, again, it's not about red America or blue America or any of those things. I'm from a purple state. It's that people watch this chaotic cutting, right? And look, let's just be fair. You fire people and then hire them the next week. That's indiscriminate. That's acknowledging you've made a mistake. That's not some review that normal private sector companies would do. I don't know a damn private sector company that would fire someone on Friday and hire them back on Monday because, whoops, they made a mistake. But let's just be honest that this approach is scaring the crap out of people on the benefits they've worked their entire life for. And I know I'm out of time. Yield back.
So as much as we need to make our government more responsive to our lives today, don't for one moment fool yourself that democracy isn't precious and worth saving. But how do we actually do that? I know a lot of you have been asking that question. First, don't tune out. It's easy to be exhausted, but America needs you now more than ever. If previous generations had not fought for this democracy, where would we be today? Second, hold your elected officials, including me, accountable. Watch how they're voting. Go to town halls and demand they take action. That's as American as apple pie. Third, organize. Pick just one issue you're passionate about and engage. And doom scrolling doesn't count. Join a group that cares about your issue and act. And if you can't find one, start one. Some of the most important movements in our history have come from the bottom up. In closing, we all know that our country is going through something right now. We're not sure what the next day is going to hold, let alone the next decade. But this isn't the first time we've experienced significant and tumultuous change as a country. I'm a student of history, and we've gone through periods of political instability before. And ultimately, we've chosen to keep changing this country for the better. But every single time, we've only gotten through those moments because of two things: engaged citizens and principled leaders. Engaged citizens who do a little bit more than they're used to doing to fight for the things that they care about, and principled leaders who are ready to receive the ball and do something about it. So thank you tonight for caring about your country. Just by watching, you qualify as engaged citizens. And I promise that I and my fellow Democrats will do everything in our power to be the principled leaders that you deserve. Good night, everyone.
Slotkin.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Congratulations. I remember coming in front of this panel under Chairman Levin to do a panel confirmation hearing, and I remember being the target of that, and everyone else just sat there very quietly and got no questions. And so for those of you having different experiences today, congratulations.
I think you were in junior high.
I was not in junior high, but I will say I got the full McCain treatment and remember it to this day. So you should be proud and happy that none of you, I think, have received the McCain treatment. A couple of questions for Dr. Mank. In Michigan, we have Selfridge Air Force Base, the only Air National Guard controlled base in the country. And we've discussed this, and any good Michigander will constantly bring up our interest in a replacement fighter mission for our A-10s, which are phasing out in FY27. I know that in order to have a better shot of having a fighter mission, we need more airframes. And I just want you to know that there's lots of us on this committee for various reasons who want the Air Force to have more airplanes. But will you please commit to working with us on a replacement mission, a fighter mission, not a refueler, we've got those in coming, but a fighter mission for Selfridge Air Force Base?
Senator, I commit to work with the committee both on making sure we have the right number of platforms and where those platforms are bedded down. Happy.
But the right number is more, right?
Right number.
I mean, no matter what it is, it's more.
Senator,
okay, good.
Yes.
Good. All right. Well, looking forward to working with you and love to invite you to Selfridge and have you come formally and check out what we have going on. It's an amazing base. So
happy to do so, Senator.
Great, great. Switching gears, Mr. Duffy, I know you've been sitting in the Secretary of Defense's front office and I believe acting as his Deputy Chief of Staff, so really at his right hand. And you're about to become the head of acquisition for the entire Department of Defense. That's a huge job, hugely sensitive job. We don't want, other countries knowing what we're acquiring and so they can defeat it. The leadership of this committee has sent a very standard letter to the Department of Defense acting inspector general asking for an investigation of what has happened with potentially classified information being on the Signal chat. What do you think of this investigation? Will you commit to participating since you were right there in the right hand of Secretary Hegseth during this moment?
Senator, I was not a part of the chat that's
Sure.
in question. I defer to others on the investigation, and I will continue as I have in the past, always to communicate through approved channels with sensitive information.
But if the acting inspector general came to you as someone who's been so closely working in the front office of the secretary, you would participate in such an investigation?
I would participate. I would follow department procedure if that included the.
Okay. And are you aware of any other Signal communications that has gone on from the front office of the Secretary of Defense, either him or his senior staff, that have involved operationally sensitive information, information about specific weapons platforms, the timing of operations, or anything having to do with senior leader decision-making? Are you aware of any other Signal chains that you, your staff, or your boss have been on in the past 90 days?
I'm not aware of Signal chats that contain sensitive information, no.
Okay. So you can confirm with a clear yes or no, you have not been on any Signal chains that provide operationally sensitive or classified information?
No, I have not.
Okay, great. That makes me feel good. We all know that our main competitor in the acquisition space is China, that they have invested in technology that is purposely meant to undercut our advantages in a fight. So if you can sum up in a bumper sticker what you're going to focus on in the acquisition world in order to shred that gap that we have with them, what is that bumper sticker?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I think two really critical metrics when it comes to measuring the success of our acquisition system. One is speed and second is capacity. I think nobody beats us on performance and capability, but we need to accelerate speed and we need to manage cost. And so I think the best incentive, because our industrial base is absolutely critical to providing this. This is something that they do best. It's one of our most greatest national assets is our economic power and our innovation within our industrial base. And so I think if confirmed in this job, it would be a priority for me to convene leaders of industry to understand what are the barriers that get in the way of business wanting to do business with the defense industrial base, and ensuring that we can benefit from the incentives that competition provides. The more interest we have in the defense industrial base, the more innovation we'll get, and I think the more there will be effective incentives to provide capability at cost and at speed.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Hey.
Thank you, Chairman. Generals, thank you for being here and for your really significant service to the country. We appreciate you. I'm sure you're not crying any tears that this may be your last hearing in front of this committee, but we're happy to have you. And General Cavoli, I can't think of a general more associated with Americans' response to the invasion of Ukraine than you, given the role as SACUR that you've been playing for these last number of years. Just to establish a baseline, you said at the Aspen Security Forum that supporting Ukraine is vital for American security. Can you confirm that you still believe that that is correct?
I do believe that, yes, ma'am.
And you also said that Russia was, no matter what, no matter how this war concludes, was still going to be a big problem. Do you believe that after Russia invaded Georgia, then Crimea, then eastern Ukraine, that if some sort of deal was reached with Vladimir Putin, especially one that advantaged him, that he'd be done with invading neighboring countries, that he would be done with adventurism in Europe?
I do not, ma'am. My professional assessment, based on years of study, is that this is part of a broader pattern in Russian history and certainly in current Russian activity. How the U.S. oriented against that is not my call,
of course,
but that is my assessment of their threat.
Based on your experience on the ground and having to negotiate, again, military to military with the Russians and others, do you believe that the Russians are a trustworthy negotiating partner?
I believe they are. I believe they are a very deliberate negotiating partner. I believe they are very strategic in their negotiations, even over small tactical things that I've been involved in over the years. And I believe they're highly proficient at it, and they will always chase their interests.
Can we talk about how the relationship between Russia and China has evolved over the course of this war? Is it safe to say that since the war in Ukraine, Russia has become the biggest provider to China of military technology and equipment?
They have certainly increased the amount they provide. I'm not a China expert, so I'm not sure who exactly the biggest is. And in closed session, we can talk a little bit about what exactly they've been providing. One of the things in reverse, though, Senator, frequently I get asked, what sort of support is China providing Russia? And I think one of the most pernicious types of support they provide is moral support to Russia, because it justifies the violation of another country's sovereignty, which I think is highly problematic were it to become widespread.
Yeah, I mean, just in open source, we can find that Moscow is helping Beijing develop submarine, aeronautic, and missile technologies in exchange for China's, as you say, moral support for Russia's war, maybe other things beyond moral support. And even though this administration has had very little to say about China's military role and about this partnership as they try and negotiate with Russia, and despite the Pentagon's new national defense strategy, which says that they're focused on China, we really don't see a lot of visibility on this pernicious topic, which is an alliance stronger than ever, or a relationship at least, stronger than ever between China and Russia. Is Russia helping China develop military capabilities that could impact the United States?
Again, in closed session, we could talk about it, but they're certainly cooperating not for the benefit of the United States.
Right, but I mean, China, they can have other interests in other countries, but I think we are a primary focus for the Chinese military. I don't think that's a classified statement in any way. Do you believe that the Chinese are watching what we do in Europe, in Ukraine, and with Russia, and learning lessons that they may use when it comes to potentially taking over Taiwan?
They are.
Do you believe, what are the lessons then that you think they're learning from this, watching us in this conflict, as we now quickly move to negotiate with Putin, put a lot of trust in him and the person that invaded a democracy? Do you think it makes them more likely or less likely to go ahead and try and take Taiwan?
Ma'am, I think they're learning lessons at every echelon, one of them being the policy-making and decision-making echelon. I'll leave that to others to comment on. But at the military level, operationally and tactically, they're studying the conflict very, very hard in ways that we know they would apply to their to any potential conflict in Taiwan.
Again, thank you for your service, your long service, both of you, and I yield back to whoever is acting as chairman. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Matthews, to all the nominees, congratulations. Mr. Matthews, if confirmed, you will be the senior-most lawyer in the Department of Defense, an incredibly important job. When the Secretary of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief want to employ and deploy the Department of Defense, it will come to you to decide whether the requests meet those legal standards. I'm concerned that Secretary Hegseth is looking to chart his own path on legal issues. As I understand it, in March, he brought in his personal lawyer, Timothy Parlatore, to oversee sweeping reforms of the JAG Corps, those thousands of military lawyers in the Department of Defense who meter out how military leaders are, or how military lawyers are trained and the decisions that they make. If confirmed, would you be Timothy Parlatore's boss, or would he be your boss? Can you turn on your mic for us?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Senator, President Trump nominated me to be the Chief Legal Officer of the Department of Defense. I will be the Chief Legal Officer of the Department of Defense and the Principal Staff Assistant to the Secretary on all legal matters. So I'm not really, so I've been reading newspaper articles about Mr. Palatori, but I don't know him. I don't think he just became a judge advocate, so I'm not aware of these efforts, but I will be the chief legal officer of the Department of Defense, Senator. I'm not an empty suit. I'm a serious guy, and I will speak up if I have to
That's
speak
what
up.
we want. We
Okay.
want the Senate-confirmed official to be the senior lawyer. I hope that Mr. Hegseth's personal lawyer doesn't start to employ sweeping reforms, given what the Secretary has already done with the JAG Corps. In that role, which we want you to serve you will be asked to meter out really big decisions for the Department of Defense. There are times when presidents and secretaries of defense ask for things that violate the Constitution, and you are standing in the breach, making those tough calls, as we discussed in our office. So can you just confirm for me that, and a couple of things, that if you are told that active duty military is being asked to come in to suppress nonviolent protests in violation of posse comitatus, will you determine and advocate that that not be a way the Department of Defense is employed?
Senator, I will advise on the law, and I will tell my clients what the law is.
Well, I think the law is pretty clear about active duty suppressing nonviolent protests in violation of posse comitatus. What about U.S. military holding U.S. citizens indefinitely without charge or access to courts? Will you push back on any attempt to use those unlawful powers?
Senator, you raised a hypothetical scenario, which is extraordinary. I'm not aware of that occurring today or.
I hope it never
President Trump
happens.
yeah,
We
so
hope it
I'm-
never
I'm- so
happens.
I-
But
yeah,
but
a
it's clearly
hypothetical,
illegal,
Senator.
right? I mean,
I can't imagine no situation where a U.S. citizen could be held indefinitely without any access to courts or due process. I don't see that, Senator.
Great. I hope you'll push back on that. What about if you're asked to punish military personnel for expressing lawful political views outside of their official duties? Would you advocate for military punishment in that case?
So Senator, the General Counsel of the Department of Defense, if I'm confirmed, we don't punish anybody. I'm a lawyer. I
Well,
provide
make a
legal advice.
recommendation, your recommendation.
And what's the scenario again, Senator?
That a member of the military expresses a lawful political view outside of their official duties.
I think lawful political views in the eye of the beholder, Senator. As you know, members of the joint force, of the armed forces have truncated First Amendment rights. So if they're making disparaging remarks about members of the Senate or of the Commander-in-Chief, that's an issue that we need to study.
If
So
in their private life, they express a view that they might consider voting for a Democrat, is that something you would recommend advocating some sort of reprimand for?
Senator, I don't have anything against Democrats. No, I'm not to be flippant, but no. It's a hypothetical, but I can't imagine a scenario like that, Senator.
Well, I mean, we see 4-star generals being fired because of their alleged views, right? We're seeing people removed, JAGs, people I'm assuming you've served with for years, be removed for doing their jobs because they don't comport with the political views of the Secretary of Defense. So it's not a hypothetical to ask whether someone's going to be punished for their political views outside of work.
Senator, I haven't seen any evidence that the JAGs were removed because of their political views. I've not seen that.
Okay.
Maybe you have access to stuff I haven't seen.
Well, I think can we agree it's highly unusual to remove that many JAGs at one time? Have you ever seen in your career the removal of that many JAGs at one time?
Again, Senator,
Have you ever seen it? You've been there for a long time, serving.
I have not seen it in my career, but I will tell you this, that one of those Judge Advocates General resigned before the administration even started. So we're talking about two people, Senator, and the actions taken by the Secretary were lawful to my understanding.
I'm out of time, so I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. Senator Peterson.
Thank you. Apologies for being late. Welcome. Glad to have you here. I would just like to talk about strategy vis-a-vis China and Taiwan. I'm sure you've gotten a lot of questions on this. I'm trying, as the co-chair of the Bipartisan Taiwan Caucus, to understand what our approach is, given that we talk about the Chinese threat, right, to Taiwan. We talk about that we're in a period of vulnerability, right? We want to make sure to be particularly watchful about what's going on in Chinese military intentions. But at the same time, we're calling into question the commitments by allies and partners who we would need, I think, in any Taiwan contingency scenario, right? I think even the Trump administration's, your interim national defense strategy talks about the importance of allies and partners. And I've seen public reports from CSIS and others that say that actually if there was a war with China over Taiwan, if they tried to take over Taiwan, we could not manage that situation to satisfaction if allies and partners weren't with us in that fight. Just we're so far away, the tyranny of geography, what we always talk about. And I'm just concerned that our approach to allies and partners is threatening the very thing that I think we believe in a bipartisan basis on this committee, that we need to have a muscular deterrent approach. So can you tell me about the value of allies and partners to whatever you need to do in that region, understanding we're in an unclassified space, the dependence we have on other nations hosting our forces, allowing operations from their land? Can you walk me through it, please?
Senator, good morning. Allies and partners have an outsized effect. It is the strategic center of gravity of the United States of America. And by having access, basing, and overflight with our allied partners, we have the ability to achieve the principles of expanded maneuver. And that is to have multiple attack vectors across multiple domains, where our adversary would potentially just be would be focused on the one point. There'd be threats coming from multiple points. It confers legitimacy on the force. It confers greater access, basing, overflight, freedom of movement of the force. And then to the extent that allies and partners are participating in the operation, it enhances your fires capability as well. So all across those fronts, allies and partners are critical. You do pay me to build a plan that does not fall on the loss of a partner. But the bill comes in the form of people, capability, money, and time. The more partners and allies that we have, the less it will be the bill across those 4 domains.
So I guess my confusion comes with my view, again, my view as a senator here, that this administration is implementing a strategy of cozying up to our adversaries and kicking our allies in the teeth. And I say that as someone who's a border state and lives right next to Canada. You know, we can go to a concert in Canada. I mean, the idea that we need partners to make deterring China affordable and approachable, but that we're going to attack our allies, put significant tariffs on again, off again on these allies. We're going to humiliate them in public, speak badly and speak ill of them, including countries we share intelligence with, is, to me, the most astrategic thing I have seen in a national security approach to China. So for all someone claims they care about deterring a military threat from China, if your approach is, and thank you for your incredibly articulate description of how our allies and partners are the center of gravity, your words, I believe it to my core. I cannot for the life of me say with a straight face that for all the huff and puff this administration puts on about China, that they actually give a crap about deterring them, because then you wouldn't be alienating all the allies and partners who live around China. And I'm watching the Chinese put in a base in Cambodia, right? Sounds like a terrible vulnerability for us that other allies and partners are cozying up to China. So I deeply appreciate the work that you do. We depend on you. We need you all to do your work well. But for the life of me, I think whatever bravado this administration has about China, the play is actually being undermined every day by the way that they kick our allies in the teeth. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to recognize the chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. I think it is a bipartisan goal to support our veterans. And I think it's one of the first hearings I've had where, after confirmation hearing, we've brought the secretary back in short order, so I appreciate that. Secretary Collins, during your confirmation hearing, you assured me and the others here that, quote, the mission is the veteran, and, quote, that you would not sacrifice the veteran. I took you at your word, as did many on this side of the dais. But since you've taken office, you've heard it, you moved to terminate VA contracts, offered to buy out VA employees that were in already shortage situations in those career fields. You placed a hiring freeze on critical VA employees serving veterans. 2,400 recent VA hires were let go, and then I think because of the courts brought back. You've been here today doubling and tripling down on that. I have no problem with cutting fat in the VA. I worked at the Defense Department. If someone had said to me, cut fat, I know exactly where I'd cut. But it's the nature of the cuts. If you're firing someone on a Friday and they're being brought back on a Monday, no CEO in America would be lauded for that kind of sloppy cuts. And then when you came to Michigan, you came to Howell, Michigan, I think in the last month and a half, you were asked directly about the potential for 80,000 additional employees to be cut. And instead of pushing back, you just said, quote, there's going to be a lot of friction. And I understand that you're wordsmithing things to say that no nurses or doctors in the VA facilities are going to be touched. That is good, but I held a roundtable with veterans. These are folks who are in the business, and their concern was that if you are a veteran and you walk into a VA, in Iron Mountain, and you need to get a claim, you put in a claim to get a knee surgery, and there's no claim caseworkers, there's no people working on those claims, and it takes you 2 years to get an answer, that's also not access to care. The doctors and nurses may be there, but if you can't go in and you're in pain every single day, that is also a problem. It's a problem for veteran center staff who have not been excluded, primary care administrators, IT staff. I know it's wonky, but you've just accelerated the electronic health record transition. I think IT staff are important if we're going to make sure we don't lose records of our veterans. And then benefit claims administrators. These are all people who kind of don't meet your criteria to be saved. We all want to serve the mission of the veterans, but what was really strange was that we had the deputy chief medical officer up here for a hearing, and we said, what's the plan on cutting, this potentially 80,000? Have you been consulted? And they said very clearly no. So I'm having a problem understanding how I'm to believe that the veterans in Michigan are going to get the same or better care, which is what we want, when you seem to be sort of, I don't know, you're claiming that these 80,000 are like DEI and interior designers. There's no way that all those 80,000 are in those job fields. So help me understand how you're going to preserve that veteran who needs this knee surgery, but there's no one to process his claim.
Thank you, Senator. I think there's a lot to unpack there, and yes, the mission is the veteran. And I think I want to go back to one of the statements you made earlier. If you said DOD, you worked in DOD, you could go in and find it. If I would just happen to turn the table and say, if you came to work at VA, you'd probably be able to do the same thing. For sure.
I don't have a question with that.
So I think that's.
But 80,000 is different than cutting. I mean, and I think again, any CEO in America who fires people on a Friday and rehires them with back pay a week later would be fired from their job. It's sloppy, and you know it.
I think I'll disagree with the judge's decision there and continue the appeals process on that. So, I mean, look at it from that perspective as we go forward. But also, again, when you look at these issues and you look forward, I mean, it's interesting to me. I would just be curious, and I'm just playing the scenario out. If you go into DOD, it's 20,000 a proper number, is 50,000 a proper number, is 10,000 a proper number. At the VA, we exempted over 300,000 positions to ensure patient care, patient quality, and disability benefits were being done.
So how come there were people fired and then rehired from the Veteran Suicide Hotline? Like, you've acknowledged, I think, even publicly, that some of these things were a mistake. It doesn't give us confidence that an 80,000 number, which is just a number, you didn't say career fields, you didn't say whatever, you just said 80,000, that's being done with a scalpel and not a sledgehammer. And I think for veteran care, again, it's not me that's the only one asking these questions. It's veterans who have a very different political view than me, who are getting seriously agitated back home. So I just don't understand the logic behind a across-the-board haircut.
Well, I think the biggest thing is what you're looking at here is, I think right now there's been, because that's what I've had to fight for the whole time, is to fight this idea of just being blanket numbers, throw out, playing Trivial Pursuit with numbers and others.
Right.
It has scared veterans. So honestly, what are they going to hear? If all they hear from people is, if you cut this, then it's going to actually impact my health care, then what are they actually going to think? Because one, they've not seen a plan. You've not seen a plan, because we're still working a plan. I'm not going to play out a plan in public that would actually take employees. You wouldn't do it in your own office.
I know I'm over, but it is playing out in
this is a
public
goal.
because you have fired people and then they have been rehired. That's not a secret plan. People in my district, Marines, veterans, have been fired from their VA jobs and then brought back. So it's not that there's some sneaky plan. You're in it. You're living it, and you're living the sloppiness of it. So I'm sorry, I know my time's over, but I can't agree that the 80,000 is going to be a nice, trim scalpel approach.
We'll just have to agree to disagree, Senator.
Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Collins, the President's budget calls for a nearly $5 billion increase for the VA.
Senator Blumenthal. Next, we have Senator Slotkin.
Thank you for being here. Couple of questions, Mr. Obadal, similar vein. So, you know, we understand you're from Anduril, and no one quibbles with that. It's a company that does a lot of good work with the Defense Department. But if I'm hearing correctly, you are not going to divest from all of your stock. And I know you've got a deal, but you know, the average soldier, as you know, would have to be open about what stock they have, what conflicts of interest they may have if they were a contracting officer. So you're keeping some of your Anduril stock and selling others. Is that correct?
Well, Senator, it's not stock. The Anduril is not a public company. It's equity.
Equity.
So I will always act in adherence with my agreement with the Office of Government Ethics as they've laid out the guidelines, and I will always act in accordance with the law.
And will that agreement be made public so we can understand? Because it's true, you have a perception problem, right? This administration looks around every corner like it's milking the cow of America with conflicts of interest, doing things we've never seen before, right? Charging to get into the White House, setting up, as we heard, a cryptocurrency that the President of the United States and his family are backing. We already have reports of people buying that cryptocurrency so they can get some relief on tariffs. The perception problem is real. So we don't want you to have that perception problem. You're leading an incredibly, or potentially leading an incredibly important institution in our country. Will you commit to making that deal public, at least to this committee?
Without a doubt, Senator, I welcome the transparency.
Great. That would be great. Just, I think, and then I understand. I mean, the concern is just this past week, the Army announced its transformation initiative, and a huge amount of that is geared towards drones and other things that Anduril, your former company or your current company, is neck deep in. And again, I don't have an inherent problem with the transformation. I just have a problem with the idea, the perception to our troops that their leaders can do things that they themselves cannot, that their leaders might be able to do, enrich themselves or get away with security clearance violations that they themselves cannot. And as a former CIA officer, and you yourself as a former soldier, you know that sense of injustice when you're at the bottom of the food chain and you see bosses doing something differently. So I'm glad you're willing to make it public, but given the amount of transformation that will potentially enrich a place like Anduril, what else are you going to do, again, to hive yourself off so that there's not even a whiff that you are making transformation decisions about the Army to enrich yourself and others you work with?
Well, Senator, I appreciate the opportunity to address it in more in depth, but it comes down to, if confirmed, one of the first things to do is work through with the Office of General Counsel the implementation guidance of any recusal, the same that all senior government officials do, and then make sure that daily I am adhering to that and doing regular reviews with OGC.
So I think it would help us greatly in our working relationship if you just provided that again to the committee so that we understand, so that when we're asked, we can say, yes, there's a major transformation going on in the Army. That's going to be difficult for a lot of us, a lot of our home states. But if you want us to be bought in, as I know your leadership does, because they called us this week, then please make sure we understand that there's not a milking of the cow going on for folks at the top of the Army. Mr. O'Keefe, I asked your potential future boss, Mr. Tata, this past week about access to the data of every single soldier, airman, Marine in the entire force, right? You are the holder of everyone's personal information, their health information, everything on their spouses, everything on where they live, basing information. Pete Hegseth has said he welcomes DOGE in. DOGE has already shown that they cannot properly handle that data. There's been an agency, the NLRB, where they got access to the data. The Chinese just followed them and went after it within like hours. I'm not saying it's intentional, but the idea of the sensitivity of this data personally and as a national security issue. Mr. Tata said that he would, quote, sign a contract with DOGE. Do you commit to providing that contract on the sensitive control of data to this committee?
Senator, absolutely. Whatever agreements or the structure of the sort of access to any sort of critical information, happy to work with the committee and your office to make sure that you have confidence in the department's ability to safeguard. As you mentioned, this is critical, very sensitive information, health records, addresses. The department knows more about its workforce than perhaps any other federal agency, for good reason. But that comes with a lot of trust. And if confirmed, you have my commitment that that trust is well placed.
Great. We'll look forward to that contract with DOGE. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. And just for the committee's awareness, the committee has received all of Mr. Obadal's information. We have that, and it is also all publicly available on the government website. There is a government ethics website. We all have access to that information. So Mr. Obadal has been completely transparent and has been adhering to the rules of this committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. You know, Michigan's a border state, so we need each other. We have a very big bridge that's being inaugurated, ribbon cut in September. We need that to be fully staffed. We have a lot going on in Michigan as a northern border state, so we need each other. But what I'm concerned about is that you've taken the mandate to close off the border beyond going after, as you say, the, quote, most dangerous illegal immigrants. I'm a CIA officer. I work my entire life to protect the homeland. If someone's here illegally, they need to not be here. They've committed a crime by being here. They need to go back to wherever they're from. But my concern is that either through sloppiness or intent, you have gone far beyond going after the, quote, most dangerous illegal immigrants and gone into legal immigrants who were given the ability to be here, and even American citizens. And when I think about that, you know, there are lots of people in this country, including me, who have families who fled this kind of environment where they have no rights, where they have no due process, where they don't have habeas corpus. So while I'll be the first to say, coming from a state that was won by Trump, that there is a mandate to do something about the border, I think it is absolute dangerous overreach to go beyond that and start picking up American citizens and people who have the legal right to be here, lawful immigrants who have done everything right. So first and foremost, do you acknowledge that your department has made some mistakes, any mistakes, in going after either American citizens or legal immigrants here in the time that you've been in office?
We have not deported any U.S. citizens.
Detained?
Or people get interviewed. If they get interviewed and they go through that process and we find that they're U.S. citizens or legal immigrants, they stay in the United States.
Have you deported
we have to go through the vetting
have
process.
Have any American citizens, including children, been deported during your time in office?
We have children that mothers have chosen to keep with them. So those
By my
mothers
count,
have
you
made
have
the-
10 American
we
citizens,
have the-
including children with cancer, who have been deported out of the country. I understand you're saying it's their choice.
But the
It's
mothers-
hard
the
to
mothers-
imagine,
the
hard to
mothers
imagine
chose to keep
a
their
small
children with
child having a choice. But have you gone after legal immigrants? Again, your standard in your opening statement was the most dangerous illegal immigrants. Does that include PhD students and master students at colleges across the country, unarmed? Are they the most dangerous illegal when they have status and no weapons?
I don't decide who gets status through a student program. The Department of State
Yes.
decides that, and we enforce it.
Oh, come on.
That's what our Department of Homeland Security does.
I just would offer
Those
that,
student
again, I have
programs,
I have no qualms with going after folks who are here illegally. That is not my concern. That was part of my job, was to prevent people from coming here illegally in a former life. My concern is you're sending a chill down the spine of America by going after people who either have legal status or American citizens. And when my colleagues ask you about habeas corpus, and you say, literally, we can review the tape, that you believe it's a right the president has, you sat here in front of all of us and swore an oath to the Constitution, and that is not at all what habeas corpus is. It is a right that we all get, that American citizens get, that people who are in the United States legally have. So my concern is it's complete overreach. I don't think American citizens, even those who voted for Trump, believe that you should be able to just grab someone off the street, sloppy, who has the legal right to be here, and certainly an American citizen. And I just am concerned that while you say you're going after the most dangerous folks, what you're actually doing is going after folks for political reasons, right? A PhD student that's
We are
unarmed
absolutely
is not
doing
at
that.
the
And
top
we're
of
not
the list.
deporting U.S. citizens, and we're not deporting
Well, 10
people
of them
who
have
have
been
legal
deported.
status here.
10 American
If
citizens
the children
have
have
been
gone with
deported.
their parents, it's because their
let me
parents
ask you
wanted
another
them with
question
them.
about cybersecurity. You know, you've cut $500 million from the budget. What specific programs are you cutting? Because there are programs that really aid states and locals that we depend on for cybersecurity. And we know that right now, while we may have good security in the federal government, if you are a local state official, you're depending on the federal government. So have you cut the ISAC program, the program to states and locals on cybersecurity?
The president's recommended budget has a reduction in $491 million.
Does it cut that program? I've heard the
And what
talking
it's
point.
doing
Does
is
it
putting
cut the
CISA
program?
back on mission.
You
And it's
can't say
ensuring
that this is the most
cybersecurity is going to be strengthened.
You cannot say it's the most cyber secure administration if you're cutting the program to my state and to your state.
It will
and if you
be
look
when
on
we-
record, that's what you've cut. I yield back.
Time has expired. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Noem, good to see you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your intervention after Senator Hassan. Welcome to all of you. I did a confirmation hearing like this many moons ago, a group one, and I was the only one who got questions. So for those of you who are getting less questions, you're getting off really easy, and you should thank your fellow peers here on the dais afterwards. Let me start on cybersecurity. You know, as a former CIA officer, I feel like we all know that cyber attacks are increasing. In your own words, attacks are increasing. They're becoming more sophisticated. They're becoming more prevalent. And then with the use of AI, they're becoming much more smart, much more capable. But if you are confirmed, you will oversee the single biggest cut in cybersecurity dollars, a $495 million cut to cybersecurity. And I know that the president has it out for certain members of the cybersecurity community of his own administration from the first time. But the truth is you're cutting programs that help our state and locals, like the state of Michigan, actually defend against these things. Our infrastructure, it's really my power companies who have come to me and said, we used to get quarterly updates from CISA and get a sense of like the threat picture across the country. Now we don't have that. We feel vulnerable. I really feel like the United States is in a situation with cyber the way we were with terrorism before 9/11. Terrorism attacks were happening. Some people watched them, but they really didn't enter in a huge way the American consciousness until we had a spectacular attack. And I am deeply worried that we're going to have a spectacular cyber attack, and you're going to be left holding the bag. I mean, you're here. They pulled the nomination of the other guy on cyber from this panel. You're the head guy. So help me understand, honestly, in a way that speaks to the average person who's like a principal of a K through 12 school, whose kids' data is being ransomed. How can you justify a nearly $500 million cut on cybersecurity, given what you yourself just said?
Well, Senator, I think to your point, the vast majority of cyber defense in this country falls on the private sector. And so one of the key elements that I see—
Not my K through 12 schools, not my public hospitals, not the utilities.
And state and local, territorial and tribal are extremely important, as we were chatting about earlier.
And that's what affects the average American, right? That's what they all know. We have a cyber attack once every 39 seconds in America. So everyone in this room has had someone try to get their data.
Senator, the University of Michigan, the healthcare system, schools in your state alone, I mean, the members of this panel have had tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Florida, I think, is over $1 billion.
So explain a cut. I mean, just be honest about it. You can't say you care about an increasing and more sophisticated set of attacks while cutting the very people who help defend against those attacks. And I want to do offensive cyber. I want to make them feel pain for the Russians and the Chinese that are launching these attacks. I'm there with you. I will add money there. But you can't add by subtracting. And I think we just have to own that the petty desires of the president are going to leave us more vulnerable. And you're going to be the guy. If we have our cyber 9/11, you're going to be the guy who's sitting there saying, oh, holy crap, we just cut all this money and I just had all the power go out on the eastern seaboard. Or the Chinese stole a whole bunch of our personal data from every hospital and every school. So let's not pretend that a cut actually helps defend against what you agree is an increasing set of attacks. I just want to ask in my short time, I'll leave you alone. I know I'll move to the next guy, Mr. Percival, you are going to be the general counsel of the Department of Homeland Security. The Supreme Court of the United States currently has a court order, multiple court orders with the Department of Homeland Security. John Roberts, the biggest guy in the land we have on the Supreme Court, has issued those court orders, and DHS is not complying. If you want this job as general counsel, will you comply with the court orders from the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well, thank you, Senator. I have some awareness of that situation in my role as senior counselor. If confirmed, as I said, it is this administration's policy to follow court orders.
It's not this administration's policy. They're not. Can you agree that right now they are not implementing Supreme Court court orders? You can't say it's policy if they're not implementing them.
I absolutely disagree with that. So there's multiple aspects to facilitating the return of somebody. One of them is the DHS side of it, which is, we call it eliminating domestic obstacles to return. So if someone shows up at a port of entry, we'd make sure they get in the country. The second piece would be international negotiations, because the individuals are in the custody of a foreign government. So that's a State Department piece. DHS doesn't do foreign policy, but obviously those are very complicated negotiations.
Yeah, but you can't say we haven't negotiated with the country to get them back. The president of El Salvador, where one of these guys is being held, was in the Oval Office. So we have access to this president to facilitate negotiations. DHS is choosing not to adhere to court orders from the Supreme Court. And you're going to be the lawyer. I know I'm over time, but I would just ask that you please obey the Constitution and the separation of powers, not just Donald Trump.
Senator Lankford.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs. You said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later, you've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, But I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those
enforcement
people,
officers.
throw them in the jail, 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision, right? So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's their job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing, authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man, list it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are there
so
to...
say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job, deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous administration.
So they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As we've stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily detain and hand over to ICE. But there's no arresting going on. And you know this better than you're trying to play political games. There's no arresting of U.S. personnel.
Of the U.S. military against members of the protest. Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you. Okay, on Iran. I don't think there's a debate. There's like a cat fight going on in your own party about whether to go after Iran. Have you commissioned any day after planning? So any force protection, any use of ground troops in Iran, any cost assessments? Because I don't think we doubt what we can do as a country in the attack. It's the day after with Iraq and Afghanistan that so many of us have learned to be so deeply concerned about. Have you authorized day after planning?
As I've said, we have plans for everything, Senator.
Okay.
And I would also reiterate how we began, that there will be a classified portion of this 15 minutes after we adjourn.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Neera, for that introduction and for having me here. And thank you to the Center for American Progress. I wanted to come here, frankly, because we haven't agreed on every single issue in the past. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. It is a coincidence of scheduling that I find myself giving this talk a few days after the United States took military action in Iran, 2 days after the elections in New York, and the day before the Senate likely votes on President Trump's big, beautiful bill. But all of that helps clarify why I feel the need to do this speech in the first place. Put plainly, as a CIA officer and Pentagon official by training, I believe that the single greatest security threat to the United States is not coming from abroad. It's the shrinking middle class here at home. I believe deep in my bones that if we lose our middle class, and by association, the American dream, we will lose our democracy and eventually our country. This is the existential threat. As a national security professional, what do you do when there's an existential threat to your country? You get to work on a war plan. You face up to what's not working, you change course, and you ruthlessly pursue the economic security that's critical to our survival. So in short, leaders have a responsibility to respond, to chart a path forward, and to not just complain from the sidelines. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to give the rebuttal to the State of the Union. I said that most Americans share 3 core priorities: a strong economy, a strong national security, and a resilient democracy. Those are 3 of our most basic tenets as Americans. Later this year, I'll give 2 other speeches, one on security and one on democracy. But today, I want to lay out what is an economic war plan. Because any successful vision of America must start with an economy that works for everyone. Okay, so back during my war planning days at the Pentagon, the first thing we did was lay out the specific problem we are trying to solve. The middle class is shrinking. That's not a political statement, that's a fact. In the years after World War II, the middle class exploded. But over the last 50 years, the share of Americans in the middle class has fallen by nearly 20%. And the total wealth and power held by the middle class has been cut in half. Add to this inflation, and it is clear why people are frustrated. In 2025, money and opportunity is skewed towards those who already have it, not those who are striving for it. Middle-class families, blue-collar folks, young people, we all can feel that something is off. We're all questioning whether the American dream will be an American reality for us and for our kids. This core issue unites all of us, moderates, progressives, and everything in between. And that unity is critical if we ever hope to succeed in a plan. Things aren't off because Americans have stopped working hard. It's because government hasn't lived up to its side of the great American deal. That deal, which we all automatically signed up to, is this: government has the responsibility to set the conditions for success, and the American people have the responsibility to work hard to achieve it. That deal is failing because politicians from both parties strayed from ruthlessly expanding the middle class. They've been lured by special interests, their own re-elections, and niche issues that have more to do with themselves. And it's been compounded by the bitter fighting that goes on every day between Democrats and Republicans. The result being, even as the economy has changed a lot since World War II, our government has not kept up. The things you need to succeed, your job, your school, your healthcare, are outdated and broken. And if the election in November told us anything, it's that it's not just Trump voters who are frustrated with the government. It's Americans across the board. As a senator from Michigan who just won on the same ballot as President Trump, I've seen this frustration firsthand. Michigan literally invented the middle class, the very basic idea that you could work at an auto plant and afford the car you were building. But today, Michigan is also a place where people feel like it's harder and harder to get in and stay in the middle class. Let's take my town of Holly, Michigan. It's full of people who aren't doing as well as their parents and their grandparents. They can't provide for their kids what was provided to them. Dad worked at the Ford engine plant and could afford a fishing cabin up north, but his son can't afford one. Dad could take his kids to Disneyland, but the son can't take his kids on vacation. Down the street from Holly is Flint, Michigan, where it's gotten harder to get in the middle class in the first place. And this is the thing that many Democrats have, quite frankly, lost touch with. When you can't provide for your kids, you feel anger, you feel shame, you lose your dignity, and you look for something or someone to blame. That anger, that suspicion among Americans, that right there is what I mean by an existential threat. Because in a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy like ours, when people don't feel like they can get ahead, when the system is rigged against them, They start blaming people who don't look like them, or who sound different, or who pray different. It's how we begin to tear each other apart from the inside. So in order to attack that threat, we need to get government back to the basics of what it was designed to do. And to me, those fundamentals are the following: jobs that pay enough to save every month, schools that prepare kids for those jobs, a home you can call your own, safety and security from fear, energy to power our lives and an environment to pass on to our kids, and healthcare you can actually afford. This economic war plan aims not just to fix these systems or nibble around at the margins, but to rebuild them. And as a Democrat, if we have to slaughter some sacred cows to do it, then so be it. Okay, so let's get to it. At the Pentagon, once you identify the problem you're trying to solve, you lay out how you're going to attack it. For this economic war plan, there are 5 lines of effort we should pursue. First, jobs. We need to help every American who is willing to work for it achieve economic security. Imagine the middle class is like a ship at sea. For the better part of 30 years, it's been taking on water as the middle class has shrunk, and now it's about to hit a Category 5 hurricane in the form of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has the potential to change our economy more than the internet did. Think about that. Productivity will go up and jobs will be gained, but jobs will also be lost. And that's going to start with entry-level jobs where college graduates cut their teeth. The skilled trades, plumbers, electricians may be more resilient. Jobs like nursing or teaching, where people skills are really, really important, might be safer as well. But jobs where you're summarizing information, like a brand new paralegal or an accountant, will be more at risk. Certainly in the Midwest, we're used to being the first to go when it comes to economic change. Bad trade deals, automation. This time, we may not be first on the list, but change is coming and we need to get our ass in gear. So any discussion of jobs needs to focus on job creation for the middle class. That starts with supporting small businesses. Small businesses employ nearly half the private workforce in America. So if we want to grow the middle class, we need to radically realign policy to support small businesses. We need to invest more in helping businesses get off the ground and grow their operations in America. And we need to give entrepreneurs back their time, simplifying taxes, licensing, patents, and regulations that distract from creating more jobs. The flip side of this is the first sacred cow I want to slaughter. Too often, Democrats fail to make the distinction between small businesses and the largest multinational corporations. And because of that, many Americans hear us as plainly anti-business. And while we're on the subject, too often as Democrats, we have the habit of vilifying success. Yes, we want everyone in America, including the President of the United States, to play by the same set of rules. Yes, we need a fair tax code to ensure all Americans are paying their fair share. But this is America. No matter who you are or where you come from, Black, white, Latino, first generation, if you play by the rules, we want you to be wildly successful. Next, on job creation, we need to get serious about bringing our critical supply chains home. We need an aggressive 10-year plan that prevents any foreign nation from having a veto over America's national security. That's what we call good old-fashioned industrial policy, because we need to answer one single question. What critical items should we always make, at least in part, in the United States? Things like military hardware, of course, but food, pharmaceuticals, items like microchips that millions of Americans depend on. We're never again going to make Rubik's Cubes and ladies' razors here in America. That's fine. We're good. But it's not fine for China to have control over rare earth minerals or batteries that our auto industry depends on. It's not fine if a single pharmaceutical plant going down in India means a shortage in cancer drugs in Michigan. To make sure these critical products are made at home, we need to use a combination of tools. Targeted tariffs, yes, and a shared plan where we tag team with our allies and partners, also incentives. But to be clear, sloppy and chaotic tariffs are not a substitute for an actual plan. Finally, if you really want to deal with the economy, we must acknowledge that our immigration system is broken.
It's not working for anybody, not our employers, not our border officials, and not the immigrants themselves, who are simply looking to live the American dream the same way my family did. We need an immigration plan that is keyed to our economy. Immigrants fill critical labor shortages on our farms, in our factories, in our hospitals, and in our firms. And in Michigan alone, 1 out of 4 small businesses are owned by immigrants. So we need a system that brings legal, vetted immigrants into our country. That means talking directly to employers, setting up a completely new system that automatically sets visa caps at the needs of the workforce. Some years, we're going to need more workers. Some years, less. And no immigration plan exists without a clear plan on border security. As a former CIA officer, every country in the world deserves to know who and what is coming across its borders, and no one should be here illegally. As a border state, Michigan lives this every day. But both parties have been a mess on this issue. Republicans think border security should substitute for an immigration policy and are rounding up people in a way that goes against American values. And Democrats are scared to impose real rules. So let me slaughter another sacred cow. We need to move past this talking point on comprehensive immigration reform. For the past 20 years, politicians in both parties have abandoned immigration deals, either because they were not perfect or because they preferred to use immigration as political ammo. We need big, bold change to fix a broken system. But at this point, that can be in one bill or spread across 5 bills. I will work with any adults I can find who are actually interested in making some kind of progress on immigration. But it doesn't matter how many jobs we create if those jobs don't pay enough to allow you to save every month and make it to the middle class. All across the country, people are working 2 or more jobs just to make ends meet. We need an economy where every American can do 1 job, full-time, good benefits, and live a stable life. As workers increase their productivity, employers should make sure that they share in the wealth of the good years. And there should be consequences for corporations if they don't. If a global company is paying its full-time workers so little that they need federal benefits like Medicaid or food stamps, that's not a living wage. And that company should lose eligibility for tax incentives. The government shouldn't give big tax breaks to big companies and then have to pay again to keep their employees from going hungry. That's double dipping. It makes the taxpayer pay twice for corporate greed, and it's got to stop. And while we're talking about employers and employees, I've heard some people cast union labor as a problem or a roadblock to progress. Those folks are dead wrong. Unions were invented because of corporate exploitation, and every worker in America should have the right to join a union if they want. It is not by accident that we're back in an era of increased interest in unions. Now, our unions need to become more nimble. They can't live in the past. But if you're a large corporation worried about unionization, I suggest you focus a bit more on taking care of your workers with good wages and good benefits. Okay, so I've talked about jobs in this brave new world. Next, our second line of effort is we need schools that prepare our kids for the jobs of the future. The middle class won't mean much if Americans with a public school education can't get in. We've mentioned how AI is going to radically change our world. It's therefore a good time to radically change our schools, from community college and trade schools to 4-year colleges to K-12 schools. Let's talk about those one by one, starting with killing another sacred cow. In America, you don't have to go to college to be successful. I see this every day. We live this every day in Michigan, where our skilled trades, operating engineers, pipe fitters, in many cases are making a lot more than our college graduates. Making a living using your hands is a worthy path. Some Democrats give that lip service, but it's time to put our money where our mouth is. We need to invest heavily in certification programs, community colleges, trade schools, and apprenticeships. Key to that is taking a stick of dynamite to our federal workforce training programs. Just blow it up. Right now, workforce training is spread across 40 different programs in 14 different agencies. We have to align all those programs around one goal: training and retraining people for a future economy. In that future economy, 4-year colleges and universities will still play an important role. We want America to be the world's leader in research and development. America should be the country inventing the next GPS or the cure for cancer and spin off a million different businesses in the process. And by the way, if we don't, China will. So we need to do the opposite of what President Trump is doing and strategically invest in university research. But if we're going to do that, we have to hold our universities to their end of the bargain and keep their education accessible. Because for many middle-class Americans, these universities have crossed the line from expensive to not worth it. That means guardrails on costs and student loans to make college more affordable. Now, all of this starts with K through 12 education. Let's state the obvious. We need to recruit and pay teachers better. We need to reduce class sizes. We need to drastically update our curriculum, especially in science and math. And we need to thoughtfully introduce AI into schools, balancing the need to prepare young people with the need to develop good old-fashioned critical thinking skills. But as we increase technology in schools, we also have to acknowledge where technology is already harming our kids. Too many students are lagging in the people and problem-solving skills that will be even more valuable in the future economy, and that's largely because of social media and cell phones. To that end, we should ban cell phones in every K through 12 classroom in America. Congress and the courts should hold social media companies accountable for using algorithms that get our kids addicted to extreme content. Rules of the road for AI are absolutely vital. Because if we've learned anything from the internet revolution, the tech industry will not police itself. Next line of effort, housing. There is nothing more foundational to being an American than owning your own home. When my great-grandfather immigrated to this country, owning property was how he judged whether or not he had achieved the American dream. But today, that dream is even less affordable than ever. In 2005, the price of a new home was $140,000 on average. Today, it's over $500,000. Problem started in the 2008 recession. Builders stopped building so many homes. Decade later, COVID hits. Everyone wants to move, spurring demand. Add inflation to that, and voila. Americans of all stripes can't buy their first home or a bigger home for their growing families. Today, the average American doesn't buy their first home until they're 40, and if they're lucky. That is not a good story. But there's something we can do. We need to declare a housing emergency and spur the building of about 4 million homes to catch up with need. If our political system was healthier, we would be obsessively talking about this issue every day. But we're not. In the President's State of the Union, there wasn't a single word about any housing policy, and there's not a significant proposal on home ownership in his big, beautiful bill. The single biggest thing holding us back is overlapping and outdated housing regulations. Seems wonky, but individual rules may have been enacted for good reason, with good intentions, but when they pile on top of each other, those rules make it nearly impossible to build homes, especially the single-family homes for the middle class. So we need to slaughter another sacred cow and take responsibility for how overregulation can halt work on really important issues. We need to streamline regulations that hold back builders from constructing homes. Federal and state programs, but also incentives for communities to change zoning laws that prevent construction. I know this concept of overregulation is being discussed a lot now in Democratic circles. That is good. But the economic war plan needs to measure concrete success by the number of homes built, not by the process we use, or as we say at the Pentagon, to admire the problem. Now, let's take energy. We need an all-of-the-above energy plan, and we need to pursue it now. We all know we're using a lot more energy. Modern-day life is demanding it. But in the last 3 years, electricity prices have risen by 13%, faster than inflation. It's a crisis that is sparing no one, and I hear about it constantly back home. And AI is only going to make a spike in demand. If we don't plan now, in a matter of years, we're going to see things like rolling brownouts and blackouts because we don't have enough energy, and more Americans simply won't be able to afford their utility bills. What's the point of having a house if you can't keep the lights on? What we need is not a renewable plan or a fossil fuel plan. It's an all-of-the-above energy plan. Natural gas, since it's not feasible to meet growing demand without it, but also other forms, nuclear, batteries, renewables like wind, solar, and hydropower, and all the new stuff that's still in development, from fusion to biofuels. We need it all. And anyone who tells you that we should scrap certain types of energy because it's woke doesn't actually give a crap about your costs. They care more about scoring political points and funding, frankly, their own reelection. Last, climate change is upon us. Even my Republican colleagues will admit that behind closed doors. And we need to expand the coalition of citizens working to mitigate climate change. But here I need to slaughter another sacred cow. The way some Democrats approach climate change is elitist. You're either with us or against us. In the 2000s, climate change was a theoretical thing, but today it's here in the form of extreme weather that is disproportionately hitting middle-class pocketbooks. By continuing to use climate change as a purity test, we're excluding people who are now inclined to join the cause. We need to meet people where they are. People get that extreme weather is a pocketbook issue. Let's start from there and try and bring as many Americans into the cause as we can. Finally, the last line of effort is healthcare. Few things are as fundamental to providing for the life and health of your family. But there are few systems as broken as healthcare in 2025 America. The whole country knows that our healthcare system is not working for anyone, not for the doctors and nurses, not for the admin staff who work in the system, and definitely not the patients. Is there a single American who thinks that healthcare is working well? I know this issue better than most. When my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, she did not have insurance. She had let it lapse after she couldn't afford it. And while she was fighting for her life, we were fighting the insurance companies just to get her care. In the most powerful country in the world, all people deserve access to care. It's a core reason I ran for office. Tomorrow, President Trump and the Republicans are going to try and finish the job they started during Trump's first term, cutting your health care. This time around, they're trying to hide it. They know it's not popular, but the result is this. Every single American is at risk of either losing their health insurance or having the price of their health care go up by January 1. Keep book on that. And it begs the question, what should we be for on health care? Put me down as a supporter of a true public option. That means any American at any age has the ability to buy into a nationwide public insurance plan. You want to stay on your private insurance? No problem. But if you want to leave your job, move between states, start your own business, or retire early, there's a reasonable option that's there for you at a reasonable price. Now, don't let anyone tell you that this plan would be incremental. It would change the face of healthcare in America. And that's good because at this point, we are at a breaking point. Because the life and health of your mom or your kid, there is nothing you won't do. And elected leaders ignore that anger at their peril. Then we need to take a literal battle axe to the whole way we do prescription drug pricing. Just destroy it. It's also broken. Americans should always be the place where we invent the new miracle drug. But in the system that we have, drug companies and a million middlemen in between jack up the prices however they want. And the treatments and cures only work if you can afford them. Democrats made some progress on this issue in the last few years, but it's not enough. Medicare and a new public insurance plan should have the ability to negotiate prices for all drugs. This is the Costco model, right? And every American understands the Costco model. You buy in bulk and you get a cheaper per unit price. We also need a little sunlight and a little transparency on prescription drug pricing. There is no other product in your life where you don't get to know the price until you hit the register. That's crazy, and it is purposely done. Which leads me to my final point. We have to go after special interests that keep our healthcare prices high. In my 6 years in Congress, I have seen no issue more influenced by lobbyists and political donations than healthcare. If you want to know why all Americans are furious about the price of healthcare and nothing ever changes, it's because of this very ugly reality. Lobbyists and corporate PACs donate a lot of money, and then members of Congress feel beholden to protect those industries. And that has real-life consequences for middle-class Americans on healthcare and on everything else. That's why a key part of my economic war plan, which undergirds everything actually, is taking action to regain the trust of the American people. We need a full-on ban of corporate PAC money. I am one of 6 senators who has never taken corporate PAC checks, 6 out of 100. Beyond that, we also need to ban members of Congress from trading stocks and cryptocurrencies so Americans know politicians aren't personally profiting from their access. The middle class doesn't have a lobbyist. They don't have a super PAC. They don't have a corporate PAC. But they should have the Democratic Party. You want to refocus elected leaders, both Democrats and Republicans, on middle class issues, own up to the role that money plays in politics and gut it. None of this is radical. This is getting back to basics. And as we know from sports, if you can't get the basics right, no one cares about your trick plays. So that's my vision for getting back to basics, the economic war plan for America. Frankly, it's what most Americans want their government to be focused on. And it's how government can hold up their end of the great economic bargain. Government sets the conditions for success, and the American people work hard to achieve it. Look, I know this is a fractious time in our economy and in Washington. It seems like we can't move forward. Democrats are stuck playing constant defense against what's coming out of the White House. But defense is simply not enough. No team in history, on the field or in Washington, D.C., ever won a damn game without going on the offense. We need to offer a different vision and demonstrate an affirmative, positive plan for the country. That's our responsibility and what this moment demands of us. And given the stakes, the existential threat of a shrinking middle class, an economic war plan is what I know how to do. We need to treat the moment with the seriousness it deserves and be relentless in protecting the country we all love. Thanks for having me. All right, and go sit down.
Thank you. So much for that just robust set of policy ideas. We love that at a think tank. I guess I'll start off with the last point that you made about political reform and the moment we're in. So I think, we've never seen an administration like this, where, like one day we're discussing a Qatari jet that could be sent, could be essentially gifted to the administration. But I also think that when we are concerned about public outrage, there is a perception that the system is corrupt, which in some ways insulates criticism of the White House. Your economic war plan focuses on addressing the core economic challenges. But I'd love to just have you talk a little bit more about public distrust, concerns about corruption, and then how that makes it harder or easier to address economic challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and it's hard to hear with everything that's going on in the White House, but people back home in Michigan perceive like the system is corrupt, everybody's a mess, and to the point where sometimes you'll say like, look, the President of the United States is turning the White House into like a milking cow that he's using for his own purposes, and they're like, yeah, but the whole thing's corrupt. Right? It's like it deflates criticism because there's this expectation at this point that politicians rig the system for themselves. And I think that you have to have like a radical package of ethics and money reform in order to even start to right that ship. And I think sometimes it surprises people because I tend to be more on the pragmatic side that I hadn't decided originally when my first campaign I wasn't going to take corporate money and did the bill to ban stock trading and all that stuff. But I never want someone to question why I'm voting for something, right? So I think it undergirds every vote. Right? Like, why is this happening? Why is this elected official? Is it really because they're trying to protect me, or is it because they're trying to insulate some industry that's given them a big check? So I think until we do that, we can have strong proposals, and we should, but there's always going to be this lingering question. And so, sometimes in this town, more often than not, lately, sometimes you get like, the left and the right agreeing on things. It's kind of like the political spectrum like meets around the back.
Yeah.
And I think on campaign finance reform, on ethics reform, it would be really powerful if we could ever get to that point. And if there's ever a president who's going to force us there, it might be this one.
Great. And then to follow up on some of the points you made, I guess I would just ask how you see the current debate. You talked a little bit about reconciliation and some of the impact of the cuts on healthcare for working class people. But so in a world in which it feels like we're moving backwards on costs, how do you see the opportunity to advance on something like healthcare costs?
Well, this is why it's extremely important to understand and like focus ourselves as Democrats, as Americans, on this issue of the economy and of costs, because this is what the president ran on.
Yeah.
This is the lead foot in any pushback on him. A Qatari jet, we can talk about all day long, but what he's doing is distracting us from talking about the very thing he ran on, which he said he was going to put more money in people's pockets. And in every single category, your groceries, your insurance, your utility bill, like go down the list of how a family does their budget, and he's making them pay more, not less. And we should be relentlessly talking about that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what happens when we don't have like a plan that we cohere around, is that everyone talks about the thing they think is really important, which is fine.
Yeah.
Except like you do need to convey who we are to the rest of the country. And to me, that's why the economy and costs are they're essential, but they're also a unifying factor for whether you're a moderate or progressive or anything in between.
Right, and I guess I'd like to just drill down even more on that, because what's interesting about the first 6 months, although of course you could be confused to think it's 6 years, but in the first 6 months of this administration, which is very different from the first administration, if you look across issues, you talked about the broad tariff policy and rising costs. The reconciliation package will make, as you noted, healthcare more inaccessible and expensive, not just for people in Medicaid, but for everyone else. In a weird way, the administration, it's not that they're not talking about these policies, it's that the burden of their policies are disproportionately on working class people, right? In a way that they tried with the ACA, but that didn't actually succeed. And their first tax plan in the first administration was just a tax cut plan. It didn't raise costs for anyone. So I guess, what is your analysis of what we should be doing on that contrast point?
I mean, I think the president has long been very good at sort of saying one thing and doing another, and then not having accountability for what he's actually done. And so it's our job to expose that accountability. And, because I am an analyst by training, I went back and thought about the first administration and what was the single best success Democrats had in his first term, where we absolutely obliterated a signature goal for him. It was on pushing back on him repealing the ACA or Obamacare, right? He put it out there, he ran on it, he celebrated it, he did rallies on it. Then he got into office and he talked about it obsessively for the first 6 months. He made the House of Representatives actually vote to repeal it, right? And it was because John McCain came in and did the big thumbs down. But why had the mood shifted in the country so much that John McCain could vote against his party and vote it down? We had done just a massive education campaign in rallies and op-eds and grassroots work to explain to that voter, that citizen who actually doesn't really watch the news a lot, who doesn't think politics has anything to do with them. They suddenly were like, wait a minute, you're gonna take away my health care? Wait a minute, I have a pre-existing condition and you're gonna make it so that I can get charged more? My kids can't stay on my health insurance till they're 26? Suddenly, we went to that kind of middle group of voters that decide elections and decide, a lot of public opinion, and they shifted. And he could not achieve the goals, to the point where he knows now that he can't talk openly about cutting your health care. He has to hide it. Yeah. So that to me is the model for, like, if you want to be effective, right? We all want to be effective. If we want to be effective at pushing back on him, that is the model. He's a populist. So when you turn the public against his ideas, and that's what's going on, I think, we're trying to educate on Medicaid and on SNAP and all these things. That doesn't mean we always have the angle right, but that to me is the playbook for how you push back in this term.
And I think he probably learned some lessons because he talks about reconciliation a lot less than he talked about ACA. In fact, he spends a lot of time talking about other things, which, but, you know, I mean, we note that the popularity of reconciliation is approaching the popularity of ACA repeal.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question. You said, you talked about analysis, and people should get their questions ready. I'll go to audience questions soon. But I guess a question that I struggle with a lot, and just really welcome your analysis, is to figure out where to go, we need to understand where we came from. And, you know, there was an agenda over the last couple of years to invest in America, to pass legislation that would create jobs. You know, 70% of the jobs created from the CHIPS IRA bill, CHIPS IRA infrastructure legislation would go to people who don't have a college degree. Many of those jobs were, you know, consciously focused on places that have been left behind. And it didn't seem to resonate over the last couple of years. So I guess I'd ask you, you know, what's your analysis of that? Was it that wasn't well communicated? Are the ideas wrong? You talked about industrial policy, that this was an industrial policy. Is that insufficient? There's cost of living too, like an overwhelming issue. Just how do you see, like, what's your analysis?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of important things that got done. I mean, I voted for them, right? But I think we just now have to understand that we live in an era where if a tree falls in the woods, right? If you do an important policy, but people can't see it and feel it and smell it and understand where it came from, then don't expect credit.
Yeah.
Right? And I think this is what we have to grapple with also as Democrats, right? We passed really important legislation, but how much of that money got out? And why didn't it get out? And if, you know, I come from a state, obviously, where a very topical issue is electric vehicles, right?
Yes.
And if you vote on a lot of money to get charging stations all over the state, but you still can't drive up north in Michigan on an electric vehicle easily, well, then people don't see it. They don't feel it. So I think people feel like the federal government has become so slow and lumbering at best that it can't meet their needs. And if they're not, like I said, if they're not doing the basics and making like it easy to get into and stay in the middle class, then they're not real excited about your newfangled thing because they feel like, what's the point? Like, okay, great, you did this, but I can't save enough money to send my kid to summer camp.
Right.
So you got to get the basics right first, and then you got a message.
Right, and then just also on cost of living, we had an election in New York City. Assemblymember Mamdani won the election, had a lot of people come out and vote for him. I guess I just wanted to ask your perspective. He focused a lot on cost of living issues. How do you see the election result?
Yeah, I mean, I will admit to not being like a huge student of New York City politics, but I think that what I can take from it, the message that came across loud and clear, I guess, to me, was number one, people, just like in November, are still really focused on costs and the economy and their own kitchen table math, and they're looking for a new generation of leadership. Those were, to me, the two big takeaways. And I think this is why, again, it reinforces for me, like, we may disagree on some key issues, but understanding that people are concerned about their family budget, that is a unifying thing for a coalition. So that, I think the message, at least for me, was clear.
And then just to follow on that, you know, there's a rich debate in the kind of Democratic Party around, you know, fighting versus conciliation. I mean, I'm not like sure what the right term for the opposition of that is. And then there's ideological debates. And I guess to me, I think that sometimes people confuse the two, fighting versus an ideological debate, because you see lots of people who are kind of out there trying to fight, who some are moderate, some are really progressive. I guess I ask you just at a broad level, when you see, what do you think of those debates, and how do you describe yourself in the kind of fighter, non-fighter, ideology, et cetera?
Yeah. So I would say I'm coming up on 6 months that I've been in the Senate, and my hot take is that we no longer divide along progressive versus moderate lines. I think that's like very 2017, that debate. I think the debate is, how do you answer one single existential question? Is the second Trump administration an existential threat to democracy? Or is the second Trump administration bad, but kind of like the first Trump administration, survivable if we just wait it out? And how you answer that question puts you in one camp or the other. And I serve with people who are like, this is existential. He's threatening the very bones of our democracy. That's the camp I fall into.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, that's my camp. and then that's the camp. I think that is the camp. But then there's a lot of people, Democrats, who are like, we just got to wait for him to overplay his hand, and the people will turn on him. And so it's mixing up like a mixing bowl, with these labels of progressive, moderate, whatever. That's like less relevant. It's fight or, I guess, flight.
Yeah.
And so I think that is more what I see, and that I think we are churning behind closed doors to figure out which camp is going to win. But I also just want to say, I can't put out a war plan without noting that in order to actually execute, right, coming from the Pentagon, like, the Marines need to talk to the Army. The Navy needs to be in touch with the Air Force. Like, Democrats are very disparate. We're like a solar system with no sun. like we got a lot of planets, some with their own gravitational pull. We got a lot of stars. But there's like not enough cohering us. And you can't, retake the town of Mosul without a plan, but then also a coordination effort by all parties to specialize and do things. Like, everyone has a different role to play, right? The infantry is different from the air cover, but you work as a team. And I think this is what is the second part of my concern is that we don't act as a team. And when we do that, and when we don't work as a team, we turn our guns on each other. And it's so fruitless.
Yeah. 100% agree. Definitely would like to have the guns outward instead of inward.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go to questions from the audience. And I have a few here and some reporters. Ken Thomas from the Wall Street Journal, you spoke of the need to ban members of Congress from trading stocks and cryptocurrencies. To what extent do you believe these restrictions should cover spouses and family members, and how robust should the fines be? The current fines are fairly insignificant.
Yeah, so right now, the rules are that if you trade a stock, you have to notify within 30 days, you or your spouse. So, of course, banning should be spouse. And I think I even had dependent children in the legislation. I have to go back and check. But it should be expansive. If the point is to try and reclaim a little bit of grace and trust from the American people, go big on a reform package. And we should make it really painful to violate the rules. And yes, right now, like, there are good, like, Twitter folks who will like put out people's trades and will write articles about this. People need to feel it in their pocketbooks. People need to feel it in the news stories. Media, I would love for you to write a little bit more about this. We've had some weird moments around the tariffs of just absolute, I mean, either someone's got incredible luck of the Irish, or a bunch of people made a shit ton of money on some of the decisions that were made by this White House in the last 6 months. And it's all out there.
Like, probably with some inside tip.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Just
You're
to be
either
clear.
incredibly lucky or you had some a heads up.
Yeah.
And so exposure is good, fines are better. And then you need to enforce these things, right? I think that, maybe it's because of my background, I do not mind making examples of people to reset the tone.
Great. The second question, what strategies do you envision for convincing your colleagues in the party to adopt your approach? And what can voters, middle-class voters, and others do to support it?
Yeah, I think I wasn't asked to do it. No one suggested, I didn't ask permission to, but I think we need more ideas and vision, period, in the party. Like anyone who's putting something out right now, there's obviously, books that are being written and stuff like that everyone's talking about. So like more ideas, good. And then can we try and find ideas where we agree rather than just focus on the ideas where we don't agree? I think for many of my peers, certainly for those who ran in tough states, purple states or red states, there's a lot of alignment on the economy and on getting back to basics.
Yeah.
And so, I think I just got tired of waiting for someone else to put something out, and just said, like, I'm in the world that I come from at the Pentagon and at CIA, like, if you see a problem, you don't just wait and let it fester. It's a bias towards action.
Right.
And I think sometimes Democrats don't have a bias towards action. We have a bias towards navel gazing.
Or admiring the problem.
Or admiring the problem, as we'd say at the Pentagon. And that needs to stop. And I think we got a real splash of cold water in November on that.
And I guess I'd follow up. I think it's really important for us to think about our affirmative agenda, but also to think about a discipline around our critique, right? So again, we've talked about this, but in many ways, like what's sort of shocking about the moment that we're in is that this is an administration whose policies are being borne by the very people that disproportionately borne. The harm is being borne disproportionately by the people who just voted for them, right? So, I think the thing about discipline is it's important to have it across the spectrum.
Yeah.
A game, it's important to have discipline on offense and defense.
It is. I would add to that, though, that we're never going to break through just, if we all get on the same talking points.
Yeah.
There's also a very hard to hold on to thing that I see in Michigan all the time, which is Democrats have lost some of their alpha energy. I keep saying this, some of that bravado, some of that football coach energy. And when you talk to people in my town, right, because I live in a town that voted for Donald Trump, I've never won my town, I've never won my precinct, I've never won my neighbors. They're lovely, but we just disagree on national politics. I brought my town supervisor as my guest to Trump's swearing in, and he cried when I called and said, do you want to come with me to Trump's swearing in? He's such a fanboy that he just completely reduced to tears. So in Michigan and in other places outside of the Beltway, we live our lives where, my dad was a lifelong Republican, my mom a lifelong Democrat. That used to be very normal. Sometimes people are not looking for the 13-page policy treatise on the website. They're looking for you to just show some fight and some planning and some be the coach that's going to lead people from a losing record to a winning record. And how are we going to do that and bring people along with you? And we don't do that. We're very our book reading hands. We're very much this is what we need to you can feel it. And I don't love this idea that people were voting against their interests or whatever. It's their interest was in believing in somebody, that someone was going to do something different. And while I don't believe Donald Trump for 1 second on what he's been selling, he at least was offering something different. And we need to hear that.
Yeah. I also think what you described, which is having a plan, leading people, telling them what it is, and really, believing in your own plan, believing in what you're saying. That's also a definition of leadership. So
It helps when you believe your own plan. Yes.
I have one last question here, which is with Georgia and now New York working to open new nuclear power stations, how can we make sure the important part of clean energy policy doesn't disproportionately affect disadvantaged communities?
I would add to that Michigan is probably going to be the first to reopen a previously closed nuclear power plant. So we are moving out on the all of the above energy approach. I think this was kind of my point, is like, we need it all. We shouldn't preference some. We shouldn't, downplay others. We need to allow the marketplace to also help in this moment. But we need to, again, rebuild in a different way. So if we're going to expand energy, we know the history, certainly we know it in Michigan, of the dirtiest coal plants being put in the poorest communities. We know that the air quality in a place like Detroit is markedly different than in the suburbs just 40 minutes away. So we have to be willing to accept that and understand that we've had an issue with equality and who gets the downsides of our environmental policies in previous generations. And I think some of the ridiculousness of what's been going on around energy, is that the president and the Republicans say that they care about energy for the future, but they're trying to cut off at the knees a bunch of different types of energy because it is woke or whatever. And those people do not care about the cost of energy for citizens. They don't, because those are other types of energies to hook into the grid and help create more supply so that people aren't paying just absolutely absurd electrical bills. I mean, that's what's going on right now.
And also, if you care about costs and cost of living, you wouldn't be decimating a whole slew of plants that will come online in the future. So,
correct.
We are at time. I want to thank Senator Slotkin for your great remarks on cost of living and the economy. We look forward to working with you.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was great.
The senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, I rise today to deliver my maiden speech. This is a proud and personal moment for me to represent my home state of Michigan as a junior senator alongside Gary Peters, and to follow in the footsteps of legendary senators like Debbie Stabenow and Carl Levin. This maiden speech has been a long-standing tradition in the Senate. Every junior member gets to deliver in their freshman year their vision for their state and what they plan to do in their time in office. Thank you to my colleagues from both sides of the aisle who have joined me, and to my great staff and my interns, even my niece who came in. If you remember nothing else, I want you to remember two things. First, nothing is more important to me than the state of Michigan. I'm a third-generation Michigander. For me, Michigan is where it all started. Everything I've done in my life, everywhere I've gone, everything I've done, everyone I've met, it all started in Michigan. It's where I learned the values that still shape me today. Community, putting your head down and working hard, taking care of your neighbors when they are in need. Nothing matters more than my home state. So this speech is my love letter to the state of Michigan. To stand here and represent the state that I love on the floor of the U.S. Senate is the greatest privilege of my life. Second, my goal for my time in office is to address what I believe to be the existential threat of our time, to my state and to all Americans, the threat of a shrinking middle class. Now, I'm a national security person by training. I'm what's called a 9/11 baby. I happened to be in New York City on my second day of graduate school when 9/11 happened. I was recruited into the CIA right out of grad school, and I served 3 tours in Iraq alongside our military before serving at the Pentagon. I served proudly under presidents, both Democrat and Republican. I've come face to face with some of the greatest threats facing our country, but I believe in my bones that the single greatest threat today to our national security is not coming from abroad, but coming from the very real threats that come from that shrinking middle class. So my goal as a senator is to deliver for Michigan's middle class, to expand it,
to secure it. That mission is personal. Michigan is where my family achieved that very American dream. My great-grandfather, at 13 years old, came through Ellis Island, not speaking English. He ended up starting a meat company, moved to Michigan, and built that business and built an iconic hot dog that Michiganders have enjoyed for 60 years. Michigan has been the place where hard work means something. It's where the middle class was literally invented, where you could work at an auto plant and afford the car that you were building. That was a revolutionary idea at the time. It shouldn't be revolutionary now. So as a U.S. Senator, my highest priority is to help make Michigan a place where that American dream is achievable again. Today, too many Michiganders are falling out of that middle class. Too many families can't get in at all. I live on my family farm in Holly, Michigan. Growing up, I was surrounded by families whose path to the middle class ran through Michigan's factories, our farms, our small businesses. We are people who build things and grow things. People proud of their role in manufacturing Americans' future. Our cars, our tanks, our food. People who, like my great-grandfather, were prepared to work hard for success and often achieved it. But over the years, I've watched younger generations of those same families live a very different story. Parents can't provide for their kids what was provided to them. That fishing cabin up north that Dad had, the son can't have. A trip to Disneyland, can't do it. Across Michigan, there are so many families who feel like hard work doesn't seem to be enough anymore. No matter what your political views are, it is just a fact that the middle class has shrunk over the past 40 years. And I've seen firsthand what happens next. When people feel like they can't get ahead, when they can't provide for their kids what was provided for them, they feel anger, they feel shame, they lose their dignity, and they look for something or someone to blame. In a multiracial, multi-ethnic experiment in democracy, people end up blaming people who don't look like them, or speak like them, or pray like them. I've seen this up close and personal, how that kind of anger and suspicion can tear communities apart. If you want to understand how we got to this moment in our politics, this angry, vitriolic, polarized moment in American history, all you have to do is understand that shrinking middle class. So even among today's chaos, especially now, there are things we have to do, simple things, to bring back that middle class and make it thrive. This is my North Star. It will guide my work in the Senate. Okay, so how do we do that? Our government certainly needs to change. I don't think it's hard to understand that our government is not working for a majority of Americans, not just Republicans, Democrats as well. And you have to hear that loud and clear. Fundamentally, I believe that government needs to get back to the basics. No one cares about your trick plays if you don't have your fundamentals right. Government needs to set the conditions for success, and Michiganders and Americans need to work hard to achieve that success. These basics are jobs that pay you enough to save every month, healthcare you can actually afford, a home you can call your own, schools that prepare our kids for the workforce, energy to power our lives, an environment we can pass on to our kids, and safety and security from fear. That is it. First, on jobs. We need job creation for Michigan's middle class to create the jobs of the future. Imagine that the middle class is basically a ship at sea. For the better part of 40 years, it's been taking on water, and now we're about to hit a Category 5 hurricane in the form of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has the potential to change our economy more than the internet did. Think about that. Productivity will go up, jobs will be gained, but jobs will also be lost. Maybe not Michigan jobs at first. Entry-level college jobs like paralegals or accountants are probably first on the list, but change is coming and we need to be ready. Job creation in the era of artificial intelligence means supporting our small businesses. Small businesses employ half of all Americans. They are intrinsic to the American dream. It's about betting on yourself And we need to own the fact that it is hard to start and succeed as a small business. We need to make life easier for Michigan small businesses. Second, we need to bring critical industries and critical supply chains back home to the United States. Michiganders understand this better than most because of what we do in manufacturing. No foreign country should ever have a veto on our economic security. We should always make critical items here in the United States, and I want to bring as many of those jobs and industries back to Michigan. And finally, let us say it very clearly. We need an immigration system that actually works and is keyed to our economy. Immigrants are critical for our labor shortages, in our factories, in our hospitals, in our firms. More than that, we are a nation of immigrants. I'm standing here today because my great-grandfather left fear of persecution and death at 13 years old and found a place in America. So we need an immigration plan that brings legal, vetted immigrants into our countries, keyed to our economy, sometimes more, sometimes less, and we need to have border security that literally makes sense. Without immigrants, there is no America, and without immigrants, our economy will not thrive. Second, on health care. Is there anyone in America who thinks health care is working? Is there anyone in America who thinks we are paying too little for health care? Is there anyone in America who is missing the groundswell of anger because we cannot provide the health care we need to our parents and to our children? Few things are as fundamental. There are just, in my mind, few systems as broken as health care in America in 2025, and we all know it. This is, again, extremely personal to me. It's why I ran for office in the first place. Of all my time spent in war zones, in dangerous places, nothing was harder than my mom being diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer when she did not have insurance. There is nothing worse than that desperate feeling when your parent, that first parent to get sick, needs emergency tests and emergency surgery. And the same moment that you are fighting to get those things, you are struggling just to fill out the paperwork so she won't go bankrupt. We are at a breaking point. We must change our health care, and this is as good a time as any. Every American deserves access to health care they can afford, regardless of your job, regardless of your income or your age. So I support a nationwide public insurance plan at a reasonable price for every American. Second, we gotta be able to afford the medicines that we are prescribed. Is there anyone who thinks that we are paying too little for our drug prices? We need, in every part of our healthcare system, to be able to negotiate the price of our drugs. It's like Costco. You buy in bulk, you get a lower per unit price, and we are prohibited from doing that across the country. Why? Because I have never seen an issue in Washington more polluted by lobbyists and corporate PAC donations than this issue. I have never seen an industry with more control over elected leaders than on the issue of health care. Right now, I am one of 6 senators who doesn't take corporate PAC money, 6 out of 100. It should be 100 out of 100. The middle class does not have a lobbyist, but they sure have the leaders that they elected. On housing, there's nothing more foundational to the American dream than having a home of your own. It is as fundamental to us as Americans as apple pie. Right now, the average age of a first-time homeowner in America is 40 years old, completely different than in generations before us. This is not a good story. Today, we could declare in this body a housing state of emergency. We need 4 million units of housing built in our country. That's a national strategy, yes, but I want Michigan to be ground zero for responding to the urgency of that need. On education, we need schools that actually prepare our kids for the future. So much of what we were able to do as a middle class was because people could afford the education in front of them. If you wanted to go to college, you could. But in Michigan, you wanted to work with your hands, succeed, go on, become rich. Only if you had a high school diploma, you could do that. There were job options for you. We need an obsessive focus and reorganization of our job training federal programs. We have 17 different organizations doing job training. It's broken. We need to focus on trade schools and apprenticeships and an education system that prepares us
for what is coming. On energy, we all know we're using more energy. Every single one of us in this room right now are using more energy than we did 10 years ago. Modern life is demanding it. But supply isn't meeting demand. And Michiganders are seeing that hitting their wallets every single day. If you don't plan now, it's going to get worse. Rolling blackouts and brownouts in a decade. And what I'm asking for is not a renewable energy plan or a fossil fuel plan. It's an all-of-the-above energy plan. Natural gas, you can't do it without it. Nuclear, batteries, renewables, solar, hydropower, new stuff that's in creation right now. We need all of it. And we can't be willing to scrap certain energy because it's woke. Anyone who disagrees with that is just scoring political points and doesn't give a damn about people's electricity bills. On the environment, I'm committed to protecting the environment, especially our water. In Michigan, clean water and the Great Lakes are not partisan. It's our heritage. It's in our blood. No single Michigander lives more than 6 miles away from a lake or 82 miles from a Great Lake. We all know the sound of water hitting the beach or how the light looks up north. Our water is why people raise their kids in Michigan, and sharing that legacy with our kids is the dream that every Michigander has. We have the responsibility of being the stewards of the Great Lakes. So when our water is threatened, when our kids are poisoned, when they can't swim in contaminated lakes, it's not just a health issue. It's a security issue. Lead, PFAS, invasive species in our Great Lakes. These are threats to us as Michiganders, and it's my job to fight these threats. And last, can we just say that climate change is upon us? 20 years ago, it was theoretical. Now, Michiganders understand that extreme weather is real. It is here. They feel it in their pocketbooks. We have to mitigate it, we have to accept it, and we have to be ready to prepare ourselves when we have these crazy ice storms, these crazy once-in-a-generation tornadoes, and move on and not exclude people because they don't want to talk about, woke policies. Safety and security, finally. Every Michigander has the right to live free from fear, to feel safe in their own homes and in the country they love. That's what got me into public service in the very beginning, right after 9/11. Shootings in our schools and our businesses are a threat to our lives. Our government and our computers, our personal data shouldn't be hacked. Neither should our cars or our homes. And we should get to know and understand always who is coming across our border. We're a border state in Michigan. Every country in the world has the right to know who's coming inside its borders. So in the Senate, I'm going to spend my time protecting American citizens as I have always done. For that, we need the best military in the world, one that understands the threats that are coming around the corner, not just the threats of the past. We need to be able to control our own fate. That means not letting our national debt be controlled by countries like China. And we need to understand that to make people safe in America, we need a strong leadership role in the world. Because the next 100 years are either going to be dominated by the United States of America or by China. And while we make mistakes every single day, and I will own that, I served in Iraq and I saw it close up, I will take American leadership over Chinese leadership any day of the week. So, in conclusion, let me just say that we all know, everyone here knows, that we're going through an extremely tough time in American politics. We know that when people look back on this period in history, they are going to say that was the moment that Americans were turned against each other, when neighbors turned against each other. But it is not the end, and it is not always going to be this way. As Michiganders, we understand how to survive bad times by rallying together, by helping one another, by living up to our Midwestern values, and getting back into the fight. As elected leaders, and certainly as a senator, I have a responsibility to chart the path through the dark tunnel and into the light, not by just complaining and whinging that it's all bad, but by charting a strategy from beginning to end on how we get through this moment. And we will. For God's sakes, people, the Detroit Lions are going to win the national championship and the Super Bowl, and they were in the toilet for years. So, it is my privilege to stand on behalf of my state here. It is the most important thing I've ever done. It is the most impactful thing I will ever do. It is my job as that next generation of leader to change the course of this place and this country, and I commit to you I will not let you down. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
He should be treated fairly. Senator Slotkin.
Yeah, I just want to say I think this is a really important vote. I appreciate the authors, the co-sponsors bringing it up. I was a co-sponsor of a very similar bill just for members of Congress in the House, banning members of Congress of all kinds, Democrats and Republicans, from trading stocks. You don't have to sell. You can put your money into you can put your stock into a blind trust, which a lot of members of Congress have already done.
True, right?
No?
That's not true.
Mr. Hawley, do you want to confirm that?
Yeah, let me just, will you, with the,
Yeah, I
will you
yield,
yield,
sorry,
and
I
I'll
yield.
yield back to you. Just a few things. Let me just go back to land is not
Yeah, that's
an
correct.
illiquid investment. It is not. It's explicitly exempted under the bill. The bill defines illiquid investments as an interest in private funds. Land is not considered as such, number one. Number two, Senator Paul brought up the hypothetical that if you're someone who's running for office and the stock market tanks, as soon as you get into office, you're stuck. Well, what this bill does, because people like Senator Paul and others have asked over and over for fairness, time to comply, it says that current office holders, the terms of the bill will take effect upon the beginning of their next term. So in that hypothetical that Senator Paul just raised, that, oh, you find yourself suddenly locked into a 6-year term, you have to sell, you would not have to. You would have 6 years to comply. This is the same treatment for all office holders. Members of Congress, members of the House, it will take effect upon the beginning of their next term if they're reelected. Members of the Senate, it will take effect upon the beginning of their next term if they're reelected. The President, the Vice President, will take effect upon the beginning of their next term, and so on. So everyone is treated the same in that respect. They're allowed to come into compliance. And that speaks to the blind trust provisions. If you currently have a blind trust and you are a member of this body, you have until the beginning of your next term and then 180 days after that to meet the divestment requirements. Okay, I yield back.
Thank you. Sorry, that's my mistake. I think we have to accept that the American people think that all of us, Democrats and Republicans, are using our positions and our access to enrich ourselves. They think that when it comes to stock trading, and as you pointed out, Mr. Hawley, Democrats and Republicans, right? Just right now around Liberation Day, President Trump's big tariff day, 53 members made over 2,200 stock trades valuing at $34.9 million, between $34.9 million and $140 million. So it's happening on both sides of the aisle. And people don't believe that we are here for the right reasons. We have a problem. And in order to address that, I am willing to make the good work instead of waiting for the perfect. So of course, I want the president and the vice president to be held accountable under this. Of course, we saw that you made changes so that it affected their next term, knowing that that probably wouldn't be Donald Trump. We all saw Vance and Trump come out against this publicly. But I think it's important that we at least make a start. And you're right, there could be judges and chiefs of staff and all kinds of other peoples. But right now, this body has the opportunity to make the call on this body and a few other really important holders. I would also add the fact that cryptocurrencies, digital currencies are in this is hugely important when it comes to curbing people like Donald Trump, who's made over $100 million since taking office from crypto. So if you don't want to vote this way, if you don't want to vote for this, don't say it's because we're protecting Donald Trump. Say it's you don't want to be held accountable in your own office. It's you don't want to have to sell your stock. And I actually respect Mr. Johnson for saying that, for saying this is why I think it's bad, because people won't be able to earn money. I think that's a legitimate reason for this. But don't say that you're going to hold out for the perfect when we have a chance to actually send a message that we understand we have a perception problem and members of Congress shouldn't be trading stocks when they're getting classified briefings.
Senator Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do want to point out that when I decided to run for the Senate and I won, I sold all my marketable securities. I converted to cash. You know, that hasn't done real well in terms of investment. Now, my wife has, in the intervening years, bought a few ETFs. So I agree with the spirit of this. I don't think members of Congress, in my own case, I don't trade stocks. But if I would, it's fully disclosed. And I don't want to impose that on the members either to discourage people from the private sector to come here and serve. Again, we have too many career politicians. We don't have enough people who have experience in the private sector. We need more. We need to encourage them, not discourage them. This piece of legislation would be hugely discouraging to people from the private sector coming here and serving.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
My question is, what qualities did you see in Kristi Noem that led you to confirm her, and how do you feel about it now?
Yeah. I know I just have to say, you have the most incredible radio voice. I know it is a serious question, but I just want to tell you, I don't know if you're from that field, but you should be if you're not. So look, I am on the Homeland Security Committee, and Kristi Noem came in front of our committee for confirmation. Senator Peters, my fellow Michigan senator, is the ranking member. He's the highest ranking Democrat on that committee. Both of us voted for her. And here's why. One major reason. We are a border state, and we're about to open the biggest international crossing in the United States of America, the Gordie Howe Bridge. You'll be able to drive from Montreal to Miami without stopping for a streetlight. The Canadians paid for the whole thing, just so we're all clear, in case anyone starts getting even more mad at the Canadians from the White House. And I desperately need the staffing, the resources for us to open that bridge this fall. So that was number one. Number two, I represent the state of Michigan, which, while this room may have strong views, there is a diversity of views across our state. And one of the things that I feel is my mandate is to try, whenever possible, to work across the aisle. I did it with Fred Upton, who was your representative here for many years. I called him when I was coming down here. He's out of town. But we didn't agree on everything. But I believe in trying. Now, since her confirmation, and in general, if I can be frank, Thomas Holmgren, who runs border policy largely from the White House, they have been a disaster. They have been un-American. They have done things that I have heard this morning in Grand Rapids from our Latino Chamber of Commerce that make you feel you are in an autocratic nation, right? And even some of the most ardent Trump voters in our state will pull me aside and say, I don't like this grabbing people off the street. I don't like this people dressed in all black, no insignia, no notice that they're law enforcement, pulling people and masks, pulling people off the street. That's too much, right? So it is one of the most difficult things I have to do as a senator from a swing state, from a complicated state, is make those kind of calls. But you better believe that in my role as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, including last week on Thursday, we are doing everything we can to help, the individuals who call my office every day saying, someone's was taken, their visa was expired, they did this, and they did, we don't know where they are, families are separated. Every day my team is doing that casework, and you should call us if you have someone who is in that position. And then number two, trying to use the weight of law and the courts to push back on what this administration is trying to do in our name. And that is my commitment to you, despite the fact that I had to make a difficult decision and for my state in order to try and get something accomplished with them. It was controversial, I know, but that is the answer to the question. You bet. And please go into radio full time. Just to make sure you're in the right room, I'm Elissa Slotkin. I've been your senator since January. And what I thought I would do tonight, because I want to get to Q&A, is give you, number one, a quick sort of update, scene setter on what's happening in Washington, straight from a horse's mouth. I flew in yesterday to Grand Rapids, and we are now home for next 20 days in August. So I'm just fresh out of Washington. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be home and to be out of there. And then I want to talk about what I put forward in the past month and a half, 2 months now, which is some sort of plan to play some offense and not just defense when it comes to Donald Trump. I feel strongly about that. Okay, so as you heard Representative Andrews talk about, the big, beautiful bill was signed into law on July 4th. We voted on it in the couple of days before July 4th. Many of my peers who, we were on the Senate floor all night. Many of them voted for that bill while it was still being written. They never actually read the entire document. And they were pressured and forced and obliged President Trump and voted for that bill. I want to go through very quickly because Joey alluded to it, but I want to make sure people understand what this means for every single person in this room and every single person out there watching, okay? Number one, every single person here, every single Michigander, and every American is either at risk of losing their health insurance or having the price of your insurance go up. Every single person. And I can confirm that without a shadow of a doubt because I was touring this morning Corewell Health up in Grand Rapids, right? I was doing a visit there. And they're opening their books. They're showing you their spreadsheets of what is going to happen to their emergency room, to their birth and delivery center, to their children's pediatric cancer unit, right? Because of the loss of two big things, actually three big things. One, the Medicaid cuts that are coming, right, in the next year and a half, the major changes that sort of allocate money differently to hospitals, which mean that our hospitals are losing $6 billion over the next 10 years in the state of Michigan alone. They're losing because the ACA or Obamacare subsidies starting this November are going away for people who are not rich, right? People, for instance, a family of 4 making $129,000 in Benton Harbor, 2 kids, they are now going to lose their subsidies for their health insurance. They're going to get notice this November that their bill will go up for their insurance next year by $5,500, okay? A couple living in St. Joe's, 2 60-year-olds, empty nesters, who make $82,000 a year, are going to be told that their insurance will go up by $13,000 next year. Now, what happens when you're making $82,000 a year and your insurance goes up by $13,000? Well, some people say, I can't pay that. I'm just not going to have insurance. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to go without. So between the Medicaid cuts and the ACA cuts, our hospitals are looking at a real phenomenon of people walking into their ERs with no insurance, right? People still have heart attacks. People still have car accidents. And so what does a hospital do when there's a bunch of people who aren't insured, right? And they walk through their doors. They got to make ends meet. They want to keep their unit, their pediatric cancer unit open. They will openly tell you, they're now saying publicly, that we are just going to have to charge people with employer-provided health insurance.
This question is for Gus Winston.
Okay, over there, right there. Great. Okay. Bringing us home. Peter's going to try and dive under. He's a veteran. He can go under a...
Just wanted to know if you think that the presidential pardon should be limited.
So, my feeling is that is a quirk of history that does not make sense in America for either party, for any reason, right? To me, it is just a strange thing that the President of the United States has a few extra chits in their pocket to give away. And while, of course, if someone was wrongly imprisoned or shouldn't be there, I don't wish them in jail. But right now, the president is of course, having this conversation with this woman related to the Epstein files, right? Ghislaine Maxwell. She's been moved to a low security prison. She's
you know that they are having conversations about a pardon. Now, they're having conversations in year 1 of his presidency, not the end of his presidency, which is what you typically see. But look, I thought it was controversial with President Biden, too. It was controversial with everyone that Obama or Clinton or Bush did. So to me, it's just this weird kind of literally get out of jail free card that I just think muddies the waters. And when you have a president who has a deep, deep problem with corruption, it just can be taken to such a dangerous degree that he's letting out pedophiles and criminals, violent people, because he's paying back favors to others. I just can't support that. So if we could get rid of it for everybody, I would be thrilled.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it. Oh, sure. Hi. I'm Julie Bender. I'm a retired middle school teacher for 38 years. And my question, you have validated so many of the questions I had, because I saw so many students in the last, say, 10 years that haven't been able to make it. They're hardworking, they studied hard, they were conscientious, they came from families that really supported them, and they're living with their families, and they haven't been able to get ahead. And so my question is, how do you have plans for empowering 20 to 40-year-olds in politics?
Yeah, great question. And can we all thank her for being a middle school teacher her whole life? Oh my gosh. I don't know about you, but you couldn't pay me to go back to middle school right now. I would rather go back to Washington and spend every day there than go back to middle school. Okay, so this is why I think the economic issue is the issue of our time, because it unites middle-aged folks who are looking at their savings being eaten up with that 21-year-old college graduate who is saying, hey, I did what I was supposed to do, but I can't even afford to rent an apartment and live on my own, right? It's the uniting issue among generations and even among different kind of economic classes of people in this country. And I think the thing that I feel very passionate about is there are policies that we can push, including from Washington, that would help reset on some of the things that have gotten out of control. So for instance, look, Michigan is a place where we have a lot of family companies, long-standing companies. But if you are a major corporation and you do not pay your employees a living wage such that they have to be on food stamps or Medicaid, you should not qualify for a single tax incentive. Not a single one, right? I mean, why do I have to pay twice? That would mean literally I'm subsidizing their employees to get health care and to get food, and then I'm giving them a tax benefit that comes from taxpayer dollars. That's double dipping. I'm not going to do that, right? So there's things like that. But there's also, I think, a way, I was, like I said, my age, 49, I was raised on the American dream. I think many of us, we really internalized it. I think of it as almost a birthright to being an American. That's what we invented, this place you could be anyone, and you didn't have to be an aristocracy, a king or a queen. And I think we need, the youngest generation they didn't get raised on it that way, and they don't believe it anymore. And it is gut-wrenching. So this is why we need to bring more of them into elected politics and into the conversation. And let's be honest, even here tonight, right? It is a very hard thing to bring our young people into the conversation because they're disillusioned. They feel left out. They feel like these people don't represent me. And to me, the way that you attract that different generation is by bringing some of those young people into elected office. I mean, I can do so much, but the power that someone like Chokwe has of getting on stage, or Joey, wherever Joey went, and Joey Andrews, right? Like the power that they have for the young people to say like, oh, it's not just old fuddy-duddies who are in elected office. They're dynamic, interesting people who look like me, sound like me, come from places like me. So recruitment of candidates, if you know a young person who's pissed and mad and engaged, you should be asking them year after year to run for office.
I know it's hard, but ask them and get them engaged. Okay, Peter. Okay, thank you for coming out. Thank you for caring about your country and community. Just by being here, you're showing that you care. But I want to leave you on just a slightly optimistic note, okay? This is not the end. This is not the end. Do not give up the ship. This is the country that we love. People and generations before us have fought. Let's see. Is that better? Yeah. Generations have come before us and fought for this place. And they have fought against terrible odds. They have fought against dangerous, violent opposition. I am a female senator. I would not be here had there not been generations and 100 years of women fighting on my behalf before me. So don't for one moment give up that hope. We cannot. We owe it to our kids and our grandkids to fight when the chips are down and to do what we know how to do, right? The country, we love our country. We believe in our country and we want it to be better. But our country is ill right now. We are ill. And what do we do when we have a loved one who's ill? I know you all know what to do this. You care for them. You nurse them back to health. You figure out whatever you need to do to get them back to living life again. And that is what we are doing right now. That is our responsibility to ourselves, to our kids, and to our grandkids. So we cannot abide despair. And we cannot accept that while other generations stood against water hoses and dogs and years of disappointment, we get to give up now. So don't do it. Don't abide it from your friends and from your neighbors. And it's okay if every so often you need to go home, turn off the news, and watch trash television. It's okay. It's okay. Because whatever you need to do to refuel, whatever internet diet you need to take for a while so that you go to a lake and enjoy yourself and recharge, you do it, but you come back. You come back to the fight because we owe that to people we love and to the country we love. So don't give up the ship. Okay, Chokwe. Yeah? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Cindy Ellis from Sawyer, Michigan. And yeah, my neighbors actually.
And neighbors. My Lord, these people really have the hot hand over here. Yeah. Everyone's,
we're pretty
if you want to get a
active.
Question asked, then
yeah,
just ask the partridges.
So many of us Democrats are feeling helpless and like our elected representatives besides you and Joe, you've gone radio silent on us. Where are they? And it kind of feels like there's been a bloodless coup. And many of us are sleepless at night, pacing, and we want to know, what can we do?
Yep. Okay, that's the right question. And it's making me think I got to visit Sawyer, Michigan, because it's a hotbed of activity. So this is the question, and it's why I started off by describing that the debate among Democrats is not progressive moderate. It is, do you see this president as an existential threat to democracy? Because if you see something as an existential threat, then you have to speak out constantly. Then you have to go hoarse. Then you have to be providing legislative ideas. You have to be moving constantly. And a lot of my colleagues just say, you know what, I've been around a long time. Just wait. All these things will reverberate on Trump and people will come around. And I can't subscribe to that. So let's talk about what we can do. So I am a data nerd and a student of history. And I like to be effective because I can yell and put that on the internet all day long. But I want to actually change things. So let's look at what was the most effective pushback we did during the first Trump administration. What is the thing that Trump ran on, obsessed about, focused on, and then we thwarted him, we stopped him from doing his number one goal? The ACA and Obamacare. He was obsessed
with repealing Obamacare. He ran on it. He cut TV ads on it. When he first came in his first year, he was obsessed with it. Actually, the House of Representatives under his party voted to repeal Obamacare. And why did it get killed in the Senate? Because John McCain came in and voted against it, right? But why did John McCain feel so confident that he could buck his party and vote to save Obamacare? Because the public had turned against what Trump was trying to do. The public said to themselves, wait a minute, you're going to take away my protection for people with pre-existing conditions? You're going to take away my kids being on my care until they're 26? You're going to take away affordable health care so that I'm going to go without again? No. And the public turned against it. And the man is a populist, right? He doesn't have a strong ideology. He does whatever the public wants. He changes with the wind. He can be for something and then against something in the same day. So that is what that model of turning the public on to what he is trying to do is the model. And it's why I'm talking again about healthcare, because the story he began in 2016 is the same story he is pursuing today in 2025. It is part of the same goal of saying, I just don't like that in the United States of America, we're going to help people get healthcare. He just doesn't like it. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't have it, and that's his view. And to me, it is the thing you can do is help educate your fellow neighbors on what is happening to their health care. That means posting something on social media. That means writing an op-ed for your local newspaper. That means going and helping to arrange a little teach-in or educational event. There are a million things we did in that time frame that, by the way, weren't told to you from the top down. People just organically did it in 2017 and 18 and 19. That's what I need from you today. I need you to help explain to people in real terms. And again, the way we're going to be able to do this is when people start getting their letters about rate increases. Take that letter, scratch out your address, right? So no personal information in there, and post that sucker online so that everyone knows that I am having to pay more because of what this man is choosing to do. And that education is what we need to turn the tide. It is public opinion, and Michigan is a swing state, so they really care what happens here. Public opinion here matters more than most states in the country. So education, 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 public, public, public is what I need if you want to join the fight. Okay?
I think Senator Slotkin is next. Is that you down there? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Chairman. General Mahoney, welcome. Thank you for being here, and particularly on a solemn day. This was my first anniversary of 9/11 in the Senate, and I was heartened to hear the sirens go off this morning at the exact times that the planes hit, and to hear there was a voice that came over, I think, the entire campus, noting that there had been a plane headed for this building on that day. So I thought that was an important reminder. You are nominated to be the number 2, the vice chairman. So that means you will be the number 2 in the country military advisor to the President of the United States. Our troops are intended by law to protect against foreign adversaries and to never advance the interest of one political party or their political agenda. That's one of the things I think we can agree on that separates us from a place like China. You will have that responsibility of giving best military advice, but also, as we discussed in my office, representing the interests of the military and the reputation of the military, which I know you've given your life to. I mean, you've done incredible service for this institution that as we discussed, really raised you to be the 4-star general that you are. You're also coming from being the assistant commandant to the Marine Corps. And that means you oversaw the 700 Marines that deployed to LA along with the National Guard without the consent of the governor out there in June and July. And according to a DOD report that came out through Reuters, It was a document that said, entitled Los Angeles Civil Unrest Standing Rules for the Use of Force. And it stated, quote, that the very nature of domestic operations, American military forces operating in U.S. communities, has such significant implications that the mistakes of a few soldiers can have far-reaching social, political, and operational effects. And the document cites a cautionary tale of Marine Corporal Clemente Benuelos, who many years ago was on a joint mission and in 1997 in Texas, and saw a high schooler with a rifle. The high schooler was herding goats and ended up killing that high schooler. Can you walk me through, you're now wanting to be the #2 military advisor to the president. What issues did you raise when you got the order to send 700 Marines? What concerns did you have? What did you sort of push and pull in that conversation to make sure to protect both civilians but the reputation of the military?
Senator, thanks. And when that order came down, our discussion was, how do we accomplish the mission? And are we trained, manned, and equipped for it? And that discussion went on very seriously from the commandant right on down to the company commanders that were going to go forward. I will tell you that we trained to the standing rules of use of force. We trained to de-escalation techniques. We trained on the personal protective equipment, which I would expect of Marines to do before they left the assembly area. And I will tell you that the deepest conversation and the deepest concern with making sure that those Marines were ready to execute orders professionally were those battalion commanders and those company commanders, to talk about reputation of the cloth. They would not step forward across the line of departure until they were man trained and equipped to accomplish the mission that they had been given.
So if you were asked, now the president talks about sending troops to other places, if you were asked to change the rules of engagement to include arrest, detention of American citizens, hot pursuit, instead of tag teaming with law enforcement, you were asked to change those rules of engagement so that the U.S. military would be engaging in what I believe to be unlawful actions in the streets of America. Would you push back on that or other illegal orders that contravene the Constitution?
Before I go too far down the hypothetical here, which is reasonable, my best military judgment in my position now, or should I be confirmed, will be based on the facts and circumstances and the tasks that we've been given and the effect that we're trying to achieve and the training that we need in order to do it. That entire cascade of receipt of order to calling out the tasks, explicit and implied, building courses of action.
I understand, but if something was, and this is almost an issue of conscience at this point, right? We're relying on your issue of conscience, that if you were asked to do something that contravened the Constitution and would greatly hurt the reputation of the military, that you, privately, I don't need you to do it publicly, but that you would stand up and push back and give your best military advice against such actions.
Senator, and I will do that publicly, that is an easy question. If I am ever put into a situation where 38 years of an oath is put at risk to do something different, the answer is simple. I will adhere to my oath to the Constitution. That's what is expected from the chairman. That's what's expected from the entire National Command Authority and from the American people.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I believe my time is up.
Turn to the ranking member.
Great. Thank you, Senator Ernst, for holding this really important hearing. Thank you to our guests for joining us and helping us parse through this. I think, for those of us who watch the national security space really closely, I think it's very clear that the future of warfare may not be tanks and airframes, but really data and who controls that data, who can easily amalgamate that data, and then weaponize that data. And while there are lots of actors out there, we certainly know that China is just a massive player in this space. And in my opinion, has already, both through commercially available information, but also through the theft of personal information, really made a business of collecting this data for a whole bunch of reasons. I think
something like in the order of $600 billion annually is lost in intellectual property that is taken from U.S. companies through cyber attacks. So it's a real threat, even if it's hard to get our hands around. There's, I think, lots of good bipartisan work going on this in the NDA and other spaces, but I think this is a great opportunity to highlight for the American public kind of the nature of changing warfare and how their own personal data is now on the front lines in a very, very different way. So look forward to hearing the conversation. And back over to you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Young, you were the acting general counsel for DOD, so you've been personally reviewing the decisions that have gone on in the last 9 months. My questions first are on the cartel strikes. On September 4th, a letter was sent to Congress from the president. I'm guessing you had a hand in helping to write that we are now in non-international armed conflict and the department is authorized against designated terrorist organizations. How many new terrorist organizations are we currently in armed conflict with, and could you name them?
Senator, it may be more appropriate for me to discuss that with you in a closed session.
We couldn't get it in a closed session when we met with the general counsel, the man who's now confirmed as a general counsel. And I would offer, as you mentioned before, I mean, I was a CIA officer and helped with targeting. I have no problem going after these cartels. I have no problem designating terrorist organizations in general, but we've never had an instance where there's a secret list of what I understand to be dozens of now terrorist organizations that the American public and certainly the oversight committees don't get to know. So I would just offer overseeing a secret list of terrorist organizations is concerning in this context, but much more concerning when we look at what's going on inside our country. The same time that letter was being sent to this Congress, the president put out a new domestic terrorism executive order and asked the Department of Justice to designate a list of terrorist organizations who do things like have anti-Christian values, contradict traditional views of a family. Can you tell me what organizations have been designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
Senator, I'm not.
Besides Antifa, which was.
I am not aware of any designations under that. The Department of War, to my knowledge, has not been involved in that that I'm aware of.
If there was the list of domestic terrorist organizations that were settled upon, would that authorize the Department of Defense to take military action inside the United States?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
The decision to send troops into our cities has been deeply controversial. We had the National Guard, and the president turned down, I think, twice or three times by a federal judge just this past weekend and setting National Guard troops from one state into another state. There is yet another leaked signal conversation from Secretary Hegseth about him considering sending in the 82nd Airborne. That's an active duty military unit, one of our most elite units. Is there any city in America that's currently in active insurrection against the government of the United States?
Senator, the president in his determinations and the presidential memorandums that were issued to the Secretary of War has made determinations under 10 U.S.C. 12406.
Right, but are they under, just the word insurrection is important, and you know why. If we declare in the 1807 Insurrection Act that there is a community, a city, whatever, that's in active insurrection, it allows the Department of Defense, and the Army included, to now perform law enforcement functions, arrest, detention, raids inside the United States, like the very thing that our country was founded upon in rejection of when the British were doing those things to us. So right now, by your legal determination, is any city in America in active insurrection? Yes or no?
Senator, the president has not declared that any insurrection is.
Would you support, the president in the last administration asked then Secretary Esper to send in the 82nd Airborne, the same unit, into Washington, D.C. to try and quell peaceful protests here in the city. And he said, if necessary, can't you just, quote, shoot at their legs? Do you support the 82nd Airborne active duty military troops being sent into American cities today?
Senator, It's my understanding the Department of Justice has looked at this issue going back to the 1970s when the Pentagon was under duress, as well as Washington, D.C., and it was the opinion then that the president would have the authority to use federal troops to protect federal functions and property in a manner
Federal
that's
property
consistent.
we get. I'm not disputing that. Would you approve, as a lawyer for the Army, would you approve the 82nd Airborne, an Army unit, shooting at the legs of unarmed protesters, or would you push back against the commander-in-chief against that order?
Senator, I would say that the current rules for the use of force that U.S. NORTHCOM allows for service members
I mean,
to
you
use
said you were
force.
going to speak truth to power. You literally just answered Senator Kelly and said you would speak truth to power. If the President of the United States asks you to, quote, shoot at the legs of unarmed protesters, yes or no, would you speak truth to power and say something in pushback to the President?
I would certainly make sure that the President's directives would comply with the Constitution and law.
Okay. I yield back. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here. Mr. I'm sorry, it's Mooring Platt. Sorry, I know your first name. Mr. Moore, thank you. Can you tell me, as the Department of Defense Inspector General, the position you're nominated for, you just went through that you'd uphold the U.S. Constitution, you would swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, right? Correct?
Yes, Senator.
And to uphold the laws of the United States. You're a lawyer, but IGs don't have to be lawyers, but both as an IG, but as a lawyer, uphold the laws of the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So I'm concerned about, in September, the President issued an executive order tasking the Department of Justice to come up with a list of domestic terrorist organizations. He gave a very broad definition of what domestic terrorist organizations were, including descriptors like anti-Christian, different views on the family, religion, and morality. There's also reports that the Department of Defense is participating in an interagency weaponization working group made up of people from Department of Defense, from the CIA, Department of Justice, FBI, IRS, to go after the president's adversaries or enemies. As the Inspector General, you would be expected to, flag issues of law and investigate, deeply problematic issues. If a Department of Defense intelligence agency, like the NSA, DIA, the service intelligence agencies, Army Intel, were to target American citizens for their political views and collect on American citizens, is that in violation of the law?
Senator, my answer
Just press
to you,
your mic if you could. And maybe it's just over here. I can't.
It's lit.
It's on. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Senator, the answer to your question has to do with the role of the Inspector General. I believe that the General Counsel at the department would be better able to address your question.
But this is just about law. I mean, I understand that the IG isn't the one making those legal announcements, but if you learned that intelligence agencies were wiretapping American citizens because of their political views, is that in violation of U.S. law?
The department IG only conducts oversight with regard to the department. And if your question is limited to the department, it's possible that the Inspector General may have a role in determining whether or not those agencies followed their own policies.
But just this is an issue of law. I mean, imagine, so let's say the National Security Agency, which does wiretaps, SIGINT, and I'm a former CIA officer, work with them all the time. Let's say the President of the United States tasked them to wiretap people who were attending the No Kings rally in Detroit, Michigan. Would that be legal for the intelligence community, the DOD intelligence community, to target American citizens for their political views?
Senator, I appreciate your sentiment and your concern, but it's not within the remit of the Inspector General.
But it is,
to make
it's
legal
law,
determinations.
right? I mean, I think in general, and I would hope this would be a bipartisan thing, that the idea that our intelligence community, of which I was a proud member, would be turned against American citizens because of their alleged political views is as fundamental to who we are as anything that I've seen come before this committee. And I want you to say, separate from what your remit would be, I want you to say publicly that we're not going to turn agencies like the CIA and the NSA and all these things against the American people. And you are the last line of defense. You are an IG, quite literally, overseeing conduct of the department. So if the intelligence agencies were asked to surveil American citizens, what would you do? Would you open an investigation at a minimum? Would you push back at all? Or is it just okay now? And God forbid, right? God forbid that this is just kind of the way we're going to be. The president says these are domestic terrorist organizations, and so we're now surveilling American citizens because of their views. I would hope my Republican colleagues would find that just as repugnant as me. I want to hear you say that you know that that is against not only the law, but our values.
Senator, I really appreciate your concern, and my sentiments are with you, but it's not my role to have personal opinions. I'm guided by the facts and the application of the law to the facts.
Well, I would just say it shouldn't be about your role. It should be about who we are as American citizens and what we do with our government when we turn it against people. And I yield back.
You know, I'm perfectly willing to answer the question. You're exactly right. You shouldn't be targeted for your religious beliefs, but it's a little easier for me. I'm my own agent. I can say what I want. I was elected and have it. They are going to be working for people, and it's a little harder for them to have a philosophical discussion with you. But I will tell you that your questions are hypothetical ones, but there is a real question. It was called Arctic Frost, and it was administered by the Biden administration, where 9 members of Congress were targeted with unconstitutional warrants. They were given subpoenas for their geolocation. According to the Carpenter case that was decided by the Supreme Court, your geolocation, you do have a ownership or a privacy interest in that. And they were illegally surveilled, 9 members of Congress. And if we're looking for bipartisan criticism of surveillance run amok, that's a place we might want to start.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome, congratulations on the nomination to you and your family. And you're getting a little preview of how dicey your job is going to be with the president's announcement, like 18 hours before you came up here. So I can imagine your poor staff, their briefs changed from last night to today. You know, I think anyone who's coming up here to take an important position like the head of StratCom in charge of 41,000 people, it's an extremely big deal. Out of a military of 1.3 million people, we only have 38 4-star generals. I think it's a very rare thing to be a 4-star in the U.S. military. And it's hard to notice that we are losing 4 stars, 3 stars, and even 2 stars in a pretty unusual way over the last 9 months. Just in those months, we have lost the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Naval Operations, Commander of Cybercom and Director of NSA, Commander of Southcom, Commandant of the Coast Guard, the SMA to the SecDef, the Director of DIA, Naval Special Warfare Commander, the top Army lawyer, the top Air Force lawyer, representative to NATO, the Joint Staff Director for J5, the Joint Staff J3, and the Chief of Naval Research. By my count, that is 17 GOFOs, general officers, who have been removed from their positions or retired early in 9 months. I'm a former CIA officer, so we used to look at other foreign militaries and make assessments on them. If I saw 17 general officers removed from their positions in a foreign military, we would call that a purge. That's the technical definition when a new leader comes in and just cleans house. The places where we've looked at these kinds of things are places like China, right, where they remove large numbers of officers at one time. I used to work on Iraq. They would do the same thing. It is very clear that the Secretary of Defense is trying to reshape the department in ways that are very different than previous administrations, and he is critical of anyone who takes issue with him, his leadership, or decision-making of him or the president. Now, you've repeated many times, rightly, that your job will be to give best military advice. But what we are seeing over and over in black and white is that when people in similar positions give their best military advice, they get removed. If that military advice is somehow not in line with the thinking of this president and the secretary, you get fired. So there's going to come a moment. I don't know when it's going to be. I hope you never have it, but there will be a moment behind closed doors, not when the lights are on and the hearings going on, when you will have that really existential decision you will have to make. Do I give my best military advice and tell people news they don't want to hear, information they don't want to hear, or will I just go along to get along to make sure that my bosses are happy and I don't rock the boat? You swore an oath over and over your whole career to the Constitution, not to any one man, not to one president, but to the Constitution of the United States. So can you say with conviction, when your moment comes, because it's coming, you're behind closed doors and you have that moral and professional obligation to make, that you, at risk, knowing that your job is at risk, you will say the right and best military advice based on facts and not just what Secretary Hegseth wants you to say?
Senator, over the course of my career, I've adhered to that principle, and I will adhere to that principle going forward, consistent with my oath to the Constitution.
Well, we are counting on it, and we've had every single nominee come up and say the same thing. I've asked this question to pretty much every single nominee that's come up before me. But those moments are happening, and I think we can see just by the sheer number, 17 general officers removed in 9 months, that you will have that career-defining moment. And because your job involves nuclear weapons, there couldn't be a more important set of issues to work on when it comes to sort of moral decision-making. We are counting on you. The young folks who work for you, those 41,000 people, are counting on you to make the right decision when the doors are closed. So thank you, and I encourage you all of Godspeed.